elected and trusted with the responsibility of citizens of this nation, we must do more. Madam Speaker, I begin with the details of this budget amendment, but first I wish to acknowledge the consultations held by the Ministry of Finance with major stakeholders in society, including the national gender machinery, civil society organizations, and international development partners. The combined efforts of my colleagues and public officials in the various ministries that have contributed to this analysis and have produced technically sound and gender-responsive reviews and assessments of the domestic economy, forthcoming plans, and programs. Madam Speaker, this government has identified 3 areas of focus to advance gender equality: education, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And this will be done by a proposed budget increase for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service by $523,389,881, an increase to the Ministry of Education by $62,326,837, and to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, $30,150,418, with a simultaneous reduction in the Ministries of Health, Ministries of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, and the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs. Madam Speaker, in the quest to achieve gender equality, it is essential to mention that both men and women suffer social atrocities under the system of patriarchy. But due to this very patriarchy, our women continue to face the greater end of these atrocities. Women are constant victims of gender-based violence, unequal pay, period poverty, sexual harassment, and the inability to climb the professional ladder, to name a few. My colleagues, these are the very same inequalities that this government is seeking to address via these 3 sectors. And whilst I understand the concerns that will be raised by members of the opposition as to our reduction in allocation to sectors that do in fact aid in the development and protection of women, we stand firm by our proposals, and I am confident that my colleagues and members of this cabinet will leave no stone unturned in assuring you, the opposition, that indeed our proposal here today is not a fickle one, and we rest assured to this motion that will not serve as a disadvantage to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but rather to this nation's benefit. All sectors of this economy are important, but to manage a country and an economy effectively, we need to practice equity versus equality. You cannot give a child and an adult the same plate of food. We have conducted investigations into the different needs, challenges, and experiences faced by men and women, and devised this amendment in order to equitably meet their needs and to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago moves 1 step further in achieving gender equality and gender justice. I welcome today's debate. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I beg to move.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled "An Act to Vary the Appropriation of the Sum, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2020 Act 2019 be now read a second time."
Standing Order 87-2, I now beg to move that a bill entitled "An Act to Vary the Appropriation of the Sum, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2020 Act 2019 be forthwith and read.
Member for Oropouche East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would first like to commend our government on this move towards gender-responsive budgeting. As we know, macroeconomic policy can have a generous impact on widening gender gaps in our country. And as our budget reflects our social and economic priorities, it is in fact key that we include gender analysis in our planning and policy. However, we cannot simply add women's issues and stir. These initiatives and interventions must be vetted thoroughly. As we have outlined in Vision 2030, a hindrance to the improvement of our socioeconomic indicators resides in cultural factors or the attitudes, values, and behaviors that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago may possess or lack. Thus, I can understand why the government would look at gender socialization through education as a way to combat this. However, there is nothing new under the sun. And in the 1990s, the Division of Gender Affairs at the time designed a training manual and facilitator's guide on training and sensitization in gender and development, which also stressed an importance on education for gender socialization. This is not always the most effective move, and I ask that almost 20 years later, what do we have to show for it? Madam Speaker, I do hope that we all forgive the sociology lesson, but as we are striving for intersectional interventions, I believe it is key to note that education does not begin and end in the classroom. I believe that my friends in the government know this as well, as in our national gender policy, which is still a green paper, on page 63, it states, "The policy stresses the centrality of education as formal and informal sites of gender socialization. I believe collaboration is key and must be taken into consideration." Moreover, in a study conducted in 2018 by the Office of the Prime Minister and UN Women, it was found that police stations are not considered friendly environments for women to disclose incidences of gender-based violence. And in cases where counseling services are available, follow-through is insufficient. The manner in which our officers, Madam Speaker, treat with these issues is deplorable. Moreover, between 2013 and 2018, reports to the police declined by 49% despite the increase in incidents of gender-based violence. Madam Speaker, it is not that no strides have been made. Dr. Gabrielle Hossain, in an article in The Express titled "High Hopes for GBV Unit," stated that the Caribbean Association for Feminist Research and Action has been undertaking gender sensitization with the police for decades. But I must pose this question to the government. Despite this training being available, why is it that despite this, our commissioner is, by his own words, unable to assure the public that all 7,000 police officers assigned to the new gender-based violence unit will be unable to treat with gender-based violence appropriately? It is possibly this sense of futility that adds disappointment to our hope. In this same article, Dr. Hossain notes that expectations are high, but they are likely beyond what police services alone can provide. And she recommends that policing be integrated with legal interventions and amendments, social services, NGO partnerships, data-driven strategies, community buy-in, and cultural change. Why then simply focus on pouring money into the TTPS? Madam Speaker, in 2018, it was found that agriculture accounted for 1.6% of female employment in Trinidad and Tobago. If that is the case, why is the focus primarily on climate change resilience as opposed to increasing female employment in agriculture? Moreover, according to Canary, rural women entrepreneurs in trying to start and sustain successful small enterprises often face significant challenges. How are we supporting the acquisition and retention of resources by our women farmers? Madam Speaker, as much as I support the bill, there is far more recommendations and amendments to be made. I question how the ministries for the appropriation of funds were selected. What was the rationale behind the programs developed? We, as policymakers, should always make explicit the assumptions behind the policies that we formulate, and not simply rely on it just being chosen for a particular portfolio. While the people can trust our portfolio, they must also be able to trust our process. What are the results from the consultations with stakeholders? What was the vetting process for all of the issues raised? I am sure that there are issues not mentioned in this bill that were brought up in such discussions. Madam Speaker, I only call for more transparency and further deliberation before we move the money. This bill is, in fact, a step in the right direction, but it must be taken carefully. Thank you.
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Madam Speaker, it is my honor to stand before my esteemed colleagues to debate the bill put forward. Firstly, it must be understood that gender mainstreaming in a patriarchal society will always put needs of women first, as they are the ones disenfranchised by the system. This is not to say that there will be no benefit towards men of the society, but rather change to accommodate all fairly and equitably. I know the opposition may have concerns, but be rest assured in my government's competency and decisions. We know that in recent years, the gender gap between men and women in education has been closing. However, it must be noted that boys are more likely subjected to restrictive emotionality and aggressive tendencies found in a study by Amy Cohn. Furthermore, in a study conducted by Maharaj and colleagues discussing depression within secondary schools, depression occurred 2.18 more times in females, where school connectedness was the largest determining factor. A damaged mental health can result in violent outbursts and involvement in risk behaviors such as smoking, alcohol consumption, and promiscuity. Therefore, mental health education can be implemented into the school's curriculum with this increase in budget, preventing lifelong diseases that will put strain on resources within the Ministry of Health. I say, nip it in the bud. Why wait for our youth to face issues that plague the nation, then try to cure them? 15, Madam Speaker. 15 women have been killed in 2020. 11 of those women lost their lives in domestic violence situations. A female teacher was brutally stabbed at the same Pious Boys RC school in Aruka on May 13, 2019, according to The Guardian. My constituents will benefit greatly from the redirection of these funds, as can be seen is clearly needed. We need to not only focus on the protection of our women, but the education and rehabilitation of our men. As stated by the chairman of the Equal Opportunity Commission, Mrs. Sibaran-Sweet, so many of the causes of intimate partner violence flowing from men to women lie in the socialization that men and women receive from their childhoods. This can most definitely be accomplished through outreach programs by the TTPS throughout schools in TT, coupled with changes to the school curriculum. I, as the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, can aid in the support of the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts. We understand that programs such as the Skills Training Program will be affected. However, the Adult Education Program under my ministry provides educational opportunities for adults and out-of-school young persons who have not graduated to higher education and allows participants to develop meaningful skills. So no need to fear, the Ministry of Social Development is here. We also cannot paint women that utilize the services of the Mount Hope Women's Hospital with one brush. They are not damsels in distress and should not be painted as liabilities to our ministry. There are a multitude of private hospitals as well as medical centers that still will cater to the needs of women, while those in need will still be offered their services. Lastly, while I do acknowledge the importance of sports within our country, how is it possible for us to overlook the issue of food security? Each year, the agricultural sector receives...
Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to contribute today. I also want to commend the government for the approach that it has taken in finally reviewing the budget through a gender lens. But, Madam Speaker, as leader of the opposition, I stand completely against the reallocation of finances from the proposed ministries to those that have been suggested by the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, our dear Minister of Finance for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has claimed to have presented a gender-responsive budget, but has failed to meet the criteria of the same. Because, Madam Speaker, in a gender-responsive budget, we must assess the impact that the reallocation of resources would have on both men and women in our country and provide an approach that does not disadvantage our citizens. This means that we cannot just throw finances around without thoroughly considering the ramifications and inconveniences that these amendments would have on so many men, women, boys, and girls in our nation. Madam Speaker, has the government taken into consideration the effects that this budget would have on women seeking medical care? On Wednesday, April 17, 2019, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago released an article which stated that teenage pregnancy is prevalent in this country. It recorded a total of 9,058 births from teenage mothers between the year 2017 to 2019. It is therefore unclear to me why the government would seek to decrease funding of the Mount Hope Women's Hospital at a time like this. Does the government not care about these young mothers? Madam Speaker, I must also say that I am tired of seeing our athletes suffer embarrassment at the hands of our government. Time and time again, we've seen their faces plastered on newspaper articles and social media because they were stranded in other countries. On Saturday, February 4th, 2017, the Guardian newspaper quoted Richard Thompson saying, "The ministry has a system in place that is intended to help and facilitate athletes in this country, but instead, we feel as though they have strong-armed us and become directly vindictive in the process of trying to stiff-arm us." Therefore, I ask the government to explain to the members of the Parliament the logic behind decreasing funds when current and previous budgets have proven to be insufficient. Madam Speaker, it is also imperative that we note the importance of the skills training program. This program promotes and encourages continued learning opportunities for the disadvantaged. It allows individuals to develop skills that aid in the creation of home-based production of goods and services, as well as employment generation. It is astonishing to me that the government would propose to reduce funding from the disadvantaged persons in our country who are trying to earn an honest living. You see, Madam Speaker, while the reallocation of funds may appear to help some, it severely affects others. So again, I say, we must consider the consequences that this bill will have on our citizens because it is our responsibility to do what is best for all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to join this debate. Madam Speaker, the opposition needs not to be worried about the increase in budgetary allocations in the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. We, at the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, proposes to amend the Agriculture Small Holdings Tenure Act, which states that an act to provide for better security of tenure for farmers of small agricultural holdings, to restrict the right to recover possessions of such holdings and for purposes connected with the matters aforesaid, and to apply the loan provisions of the Agricultural Development Bank Act to certain tenancies. With this new amendment, Madam Speaker, we are not only seeking tenure for small holdings, but for large holdings as well. Madam Speaker, we would also like to recognize women in agriculture and implement more strategies to allow women to access land tenure. Madam Speaker, we are planning on implementing harsher penalties for those individuals who are seen committing predial larceny. This will protect all of our farmers. Madam Speaker, members of the opposition may ask, why now? Well, agriculture is recognized as a major component of food security and economic viability. By executing these penalties and policies, we are securing that land ownership is simpler and livestock and crop production is protected. Madam Speaker, we are all aware of the incident that occurred where our athletes were stranded, like the member of Superior West, Superior stated. I know members of the opposition are wondering, why reduce allocations in the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs? Well, I am here to assure my counterparts that I am working closely with the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs to strengthen our policies so incidents like this will not arise again. policies such as ensuring each member of each national team is equipped with departure ticket and return ticket before leaving Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I would also like to state I am working closely with the Minister of Labour, the Minister of Public Utilities, and the Minister of Education to aid in the fight against period poverty. I know, Madam Speaker, that the opposition is pondering on why we are not utilizing the Ministry of Health. Maybe it is because they are reallocating their funds. No, it is because period poverty is not a ministry issue, it is a societal issue. With that being said, Madam Speaker, I propose a legislation to encourage the public and private sector to assist in the provision of sanitary products in all schools and all business places. Madam Speaker, condoms are being given out to our men, but sanitary products are never given out to our women. Let us try and put an end to the stigma and secrecy when it comes to sanitary products. We are in the 21st century, Madam Speaker, and that taboo should not still exist. Madam Speaker, I will end on this note that this bill amendment should end in a bipartisan vote, and I fully support my Minister of Finance. Thank you.
Member for Talparo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Gender equality is more than just a goal. It is a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and reducing poverty and building good governance. Calling gender-based violence a woman issue is part of the problem. It gives a lot of men an excuse to not pay attention. Madam Speaker, both women and men experience gender-based violence, but majority women and girls. The Human Development Atlas acknowledges that crime and violence continues to be one of the most critical areas that needs to be addressed in context of national security development. Economic growth and meaningful democracy will not be possible unless crime and violence is brought under control and all citizens can feel safe and secured in both rural and urban areas. According to the Cambridge, gender equality is more often not viewed as a social justice and feminist issue rather than a national security issue, but extendable and low priority to manipulate concerns. Such views are common even though studies have repeatedly shown that gender inequality is a global concern linked to domestic conflict. The National Prevalence conducted a survey on gender-based violence in CARICOM, which showed that 29% of women experience physical or sexual violence from a partner. Gender-based violence is a national security issue, as I stated before. It is not just to be addressed within the homes, but it is a public issue and should be tackled in all spheres. Persons have to move beyond just keeping the information to themselves and see it as a crime and a human right that needs to be reported and dealt with. Increasing the funds won't change the issues in gender-based violence. What is needed to be done is for trained persons to go out and educate persons about the importance of gender equality and how to stop gender-based violence. With that being said, the government should not redirect funds from the Ministry of Health to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service because the Honorable Edmund Dillon himself said in the 18th sitting, 5th session, 11th Parliament on February 28, 2020, that since August 2018, the reformation of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has been ongoing. In my perspective, increasing the budget for the TTPS for works that has already been done isn't necessary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to join today's debate. I stand today proud after celebrating International Women's Day yesterday to make this statement. Gender equality is not just a woman's issue, but also a business issue. At the Ministry of Trade and Industry, our mission is to work as an innovative team championing business growth and development. In 2018, we were able to collaborate with the Ministry of Agriculture to work with the people of Moruga to introduce mass production of the only indigenous rice to TNT. I am pleased to say our efforts to introducing it to the international market has been successful. Madam Speaker, that is one example of why today I stand with the Minister of Finance and her diligence to make the necessary changes to the 2020 budget as we aim to reach our sustainable development goals, which includes food security. Madam Speaker, as a Member of Parliament for a rural community, I'm excited for what is to come. I also plead with our colleagues who represent many of the rural communities in Trinidad to understand the vision outlined and stand with us. I would also like to bring to your attention the foreign exchange situation in our country. It is not breaking news that we have a shortage, which is why we're putting our best foot forward to reduce our food import bill. The development of farming in rural areas will contribute to employment opportunities, foreign exchange, as well as agri-tourism, as demonstrated by locally run farm group, One Family Farm, who invites tourists from across the globe to volunteer with them at the farm in Moruga. I would like to end my contribution today with a quote from our Prime Minister. Please allow me to quote. "Women and girls must also be equal partners in our collaborative efforts to build peaceful and sustainable societies and to promote and protect human rights. The promotion of gender equity and equality is essential in this regard. It is equally important to consolidate an integrated social protection system that improves living conditions and creates opportunities for women and girls to achieve their full potential." I thank you.
Member for Barataria.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to make my contribution. Madam Speaker, the proposed bill seems to suggest that gender-responsive budgeting would ensure the needs of men, women, boys, and girls are met in this country. While this may be so broadly, this is not the reality for my Barataria constituency. In fact, the budget cut proposed to cut two very pertinent ministries, namely the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs and the Ministry of Community Development, which will quite be the contrary to the intended outcome and may cause greater disparities within my constituency. Madam Speaker, cultural arts has been celebrated in my constituency for several years. In fact, Barataria houses several steel orchestras, both in conventional and steel pan bands category, for one which is 4 times Panorama champion, Harmonites. Steel pan forms a fundamental part of community and is evident by the hundreds of youths, both males and females, involved annually. This undoubtedly forms a part of their self-development and, of course, provides an alternative to illicit engagement. Madam Speaker, please permit me to now briefly touch on youth affairs and sports. The Malik Youth Facility, Youth Resource and Development Center is extremely beneficial to youth within the Barataria community. Both young men and young women are given the opportunity to develop skills through the program offered regardless of their origins or present circumstances. Programs offered include electrical installation, remedial reading, cosmetology. Madam Speaker, there are several reasons these programs are so heavily populated by the members of the community and other neighboring communities. This is because it is accessible. The programs are tailored to meet the needs of members of my constituency. Madam Speaker, these programs all stand to be negatively effective and possibly eliminated if there is to be a budget cut. Potentially jeopardizing these programs will mean the young men and women in my community now stand to be marginalized. Let me remind the members of the government
that reallocation of expenditures must be simultaneous with the needs of the population by whom we elect. As such, intersectionality must be considered. Let me conclude by saying this. While the budget cut might seem necessary, I urge the members of the ruling bench to focus on prioritization. Yes, we the opposition do very much hold the same passion for gender-responsive budgeting, but as transformational leaders, I cannot support this bill with such clearly existing gaps. Finally, we must remember our mandate to serve the people and must strive for the continued development of our beloved Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Members, in accordance with Standing Order 44, verse 10, I ask that hereafter you refrain from reading from your notes. I now call upon the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the privilege to debate today. First and foremost, I understand the concerns that come of this increased allocation. However, it will enhance the lives of both boys and girls. It is the year 2020, and we are striving towards an equitable society. While there have been instances where gender stereotypes prevailed in specific institutions, this current government is concerned with revolutionizing the educational system for each and every child, despite race, gender, or socioeconomic status. We will be ensuring educational equality across the board. Course materials such as textbooks will be revised to ensure that no gender stereotyping will be appropriated in the classroom setting. Furthermore, according to a 2013 Guardian article, 1.3% of Trinidad and Tobago's youth population aged 15 to 21 are afflicted with HIV or AIDS. Madam Speaker, why is it that our children suffer due to a faulty system that we can work to fix through this bill? The Ministries of Education and Health will partner to provide an amalgamation of general health education and comprehensive sexuality education. It will cover many topics, from awareness of illness, especially in light of COVID-19, to the concern of safe sex, to combat teen pregnancies and STDs. This collaboration will also extend to ensuring provision of sanitary napkins for primary and secondary school females so that this natural occurrence does not hinder their ability to receive education. Health education is undoubtedly vital, but so is the emotional well-being of our children. There must be an equilibrium. Madam Speaker, we cannot tie one shoelace and leave the other undone. We will still trip. We must consider the emotional afflictions of children and adolescents. They too need a safe space sans stigma or judgment. Ergo, counselors will be available to students. Madam Speaker, we cannot leave their laces untied because we will be responsible for the aftermath of the fall. Proceeding on, there will be mandatory training for primary and secondary school teachers to ensure that they are properly educated on gender inequality, discrimination, and bullying in the classroom setting, and how to combat this properly. They will be taught to utilize inclusive language, mediate, and be mindful of creating a gender bias-free environment. It was never okay for a teacher to tell a child to man up because men don't cry, or only men can do this. Madam Speaker, we are solidifying this fact. Through you, Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to let us take a step towards a future that welcomes our children and their children with arms of equity. Let us not take a step back by not passing this bill. Thank you.
Member for Karuni.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am not here today to debate the critical nature of a gender-responsive bill. However, it appears to me that the recommendations made today are at best a collage of well-decorated words that were cut from various international agreements, pasted together, and presented here today as gender-responsive budgeting. Madam Speaker, as my colleague from Aruka so nicely outlined, that mental health issues are a major problem in the society. Mental health issues are also linked to gender-based violence, as well as male underachievement, which I'm yet to hear my Minister of Education address how she's going to deal with the male underachievement in our society. It is commendable, Madam Speaker, that the Minister of Education intends to implement programs to assist our students through guidance counselors. Yet I'm yet to hear her outline how she intends to do this. Madam Speaker, I would like to propose that in order to ensure the mental health of our citizens are secured and the development of our children, the future of this nation, is secured, I would like to propose a personal development program where our counselors engage in 1-hour weekly sessions with our students. I would also like to propose that we hire more male counselors, as in the District of Caroni, we currently have 1 male counselor representing the Ministry of Education. This is critical due to the feminization of the teaching profession and the high prevalence of single-parent matriarchal households. A study done by the Central Statistical Office of Trinidad and Tobago stated that 33% of households are female-headed households, and of these, single-parent households are majority female. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I propose that rather than throwing more money at the TTPS, we hire more counselors so that our students can engage in meaningful dialogue and allow them to express their thoughts on topics related to identity, self-esteem, confidence, interpersonal issues, conflict resolution, violence, depression, and anxiety. Madam Speaker, I would also like to suggest that our students are allowed to engage in joint sessions where males and females can interact and see how they analyze situations differently. Also, Madam Speaker, in order to address the gender stereotyping of fields, I suggest that our counselors put career fairs in place where men and women from fields that were previously gender stereotyped come to represent and show our young men and women how we can break these barriers. Additionally, Madam Speaker, in order to ensure that the interventions put in place by this government are succeeded, I strongly suggest that we put preventative, sorry, Madam Speaker, just give me a second to peruse my notes, please. So this program does not go awry like most of the interventions put in place by this government. I have outlined measures to ensure the success of the program. Firstly, we must recruit more male.
Expired. Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to enter into this debate. Madam Speaker, an increase in the allocation of the budget to the Ministry of Education for the provision of material that speaks to gender equality and an environment that promotes social inclusivity for students will inevitably raise the caliber of the labor force present in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the students today learning about the principles of social cohesion and social inclusion will go on to perpetuate their values in the workplace, resulting in an environment free from discrimination, free from prejudice of individuals living with HIV and AIDS, free from racial tensions, and free from gender biases. Madam Speaker, it is well known that education is critical in dismantling discrimination, how much more effective will this education be if implemented as a seed in a child's education rather than reprogramming an adult mindset? Furthermore, Madam Speaker, according to Dr. Reddock and Dr. Yvonne Bob Smith, in their study of reconciling work and family issues, policies, and issues in Trinidad and Tobago, they reveal that male employment far exceeds that of female employment in the areas of technical, craft sectors, and elementary occupations. As many of these occupations are still perceived as profoundly masculine, women are still a minority in the vocational training programs and so are not easily employed in these programs. But the solution, my colleagues, is not to simply throw money at the problems and just increase the training for women in these issues. In order for the program to be effective, according to the International Youth Foundation, there must be stakeholder involvement in the capacity building experience of these women, as oftentimes these women complain about a lack of support from their male counterparts, practically, financially, or emotionally, ultimately deters them from participating in such programs. Which is why my government is tackling the root cause of the issue by proposing gender-sensitive training. But to do so in an extensive and permanent manner, more funding is simply required. This gender-sensitive training is a tool to increase women participation in traditionally male-dominated sectors. However, this is not a one-sided fight. I repeat, this is not a one-sided fight. This training can also increase male participation in the areas of professionals where they represent only 2.1% according to the study I referenced above, and other sectors that are perceived as feminine. Additionally, we as a government recognize how women may be disadvantaged through this reallocation of funds from the Ministry of Health, which is why we are working on initiatives to address this, such as the provision of feminine products to all working women. In closing, Madam Speaker, the International Labour Organization recognizes, and I quote, a solid formal education, as well as effective and relevant vocational training, labour market information and services, and work experience are recognized as key factors in raising employability for successful insertion in the labour market. Madam Speaker, this solid education must include gender-sensitive training if we demand to see a real change in Trinidad and Tobago, a sustainable change in Trinidad and Tobago, a paradigm shift in Trinidad and Tobago. Be part of history. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Faizabad.
Madam Speaker, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this progressive bill. It is encouraging that the government is finally addressing the need to implement gender-responsive budgeting to combat gender inequity in this country. To that effect, I must commend them. However, there are obvious flaws in this bill. Madam Speaker, the source of funds for this initiative is problematic. It is laughable that the Minister of Finance saw it fit to reallocate money from the Ministry of Community Development, which has made significant strides in promoting gender equality. As the member for Faizabad, it is my duty to ensure that my constituents are not adversely affected, which this bill seems to do. I personally know of a successful baker in Faizabad who has benefited from this program. She was able to utilize the skills learned to provide for herself and her family. Thus, it is my belief that you simply cannot take from an already successful ministerial initiative to provide for another. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, it is my opinion that my friend, the Minister of Labour, has a suitable portfolio to tackle this issue. Yet, I cannot find the logic as to why nothing is being allocated or restructured in this ministry. A plethora of gender issues exist in the labour sphere, such as disproportionate gender representation, unequal remuneration, and unfair benefits. According to the Female Labor Force Participation, which was a case study of Trinidad and Tobago published by the Central Bank, only 51% of women were employed compared to almost 74% of men. The report further suggests that this is as a result of uneven consequential effects of children, lack of education, and marital status. Access to work is a pivotal empowerment tool, and thus more should be done to improve its accessibility through the effective management of employment programs. Similarly, Madam Speaker, there is a critical need for effective legislative intervention to ensure equal remuneration. Although there are constitutional and legislative protections against discrimination, there are still major wage gaps. The continuous sample survey of the population published by the Central Statistics Office of Trinidad shows that the average income for men exceeded women across all occupational groupings. This difference poses the potential for decreased participation of women in the workforce due to a lack of motivation and sentiments of unfair treatment. I therefore ask, what is being done to address these major issues in labor which continue to perpetuate gender inequality? Lastly, a gender-responsive bill must consider the interests of everyone, which this bill does not. Men also experience injustices, which is highlighted in the lack of legislative protection, for example, for paternity leave. Under the Maternity Protection Bill, a woman is entitled to 14 weeks paid leave and to return to work in a position no less favorable than that she left. Yet, there is no equivalent provision for men. The bill needs...
Member for Tunapuna.
Madam Speaker, thank you for this opportunity. Madam Speaker, before I get into the height of things, I would like the learned opposition members to ponder on the saying that money talks and the only thing that it says is goodbye. The government, by implementing this strategic method of gender-responsive budgeting, aims not just to let our resources say goodbye. Madam Speaker, I think it's only fair that we focus on sustainable methods to ensure that all members in society are functional, protected, and employed and can contribute to the further growth of our society. The United Nations Development Programme, to which Trinidad and Tobago is part of, goal number 4 states to provide quality education. Quality education, Madam Speaker, as far as I am aware, does not exclude and does not promote bias. Is it not fair that the government comes up with programs to allow fair chance and learning for all? For the boys who feel stuck in classrooms, for the girls who feel like the society has already allocated a stereotypical space for them. As the government, we would want to build a future that is stable and, most importantly, shape a future with equitable opportunities. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, before the kettle is quick to call the pot black and quote endless crime statistics, I would like to remind my learned colleagues in the opposition, before they trip on their own shoelaces, Madam Speaker, that effective policing is the goal of the government. We have recognized, and we, as the action people that we are, have accepted that better must be done for the population of Trinidad and Tobago. Better will be done for the young women and silent men who have experienced gender-based violence. Better will be done for the voiceless. Madam Speaker, according to the Globalization, Agriculture, and Food in the Caribbean, Climate Change, Gender, and Geography by Clinton L. Beckford and Kevin Riney, women are the ones that are usually disadvantaged in society and are not allowed the same opportunities as men. This is specifically so for women farmers. The Tunapuna area, Madam Speaker, is well known for its market. This provides a friendly and pleasant environment. Madam Speaker, this bill will be useful for those women of my constituency who will learn and adopt new methods to make profits and will encourage women to fight against the status quo. This allows women to build independence, to retain autonomy, and the entire country benefits from food security. Madam Speaker, A move to equality is a move to growth. So I leave my fellow members of the opposition with the question, can we allow our money to say hello once more? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Princestown.
I thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to contribute. I am completely against the drastic reduction of funds from the Ministry of Health. I commend the government for their attempt all the week to alleviate gender-based violence with this bill, but obviously I cannot accept this. They propose that they would be deducting $523,389,831 from the Ministry of Health to increase the funds for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. I find it hard to understand what exactly was going through the government's mind when deciding on these deductions. Health should be a major priority. I am the opposition member for Princestown, a constituency that my colleagues on the other side has clearly never been to. I reckon if they had, they would see the healthcare situation and would dare not even consider the deduction they wish to make. Madam Speaker, my constituency comprises of 52,382 females and 49,993 males, according to the Caribbean Local Economic Development Program Local Area Profile for Princestown. We have to account for the thousands of unwanted teen pregnancies, STIs, and everything related to sexual health. The health center in Princestown is in horrible conditions, where, in case of childbirth, my constituents must travel further to San Fernando General Hospital to receive the proper medical treatment they require. Imagine being in labor and having to be stuck in traffic or enduring longer drives. It is horrible. How are we to educate the youths on family planning with such a huge reduction? What about the males? They are very reluctant when it comes to going for screening, checkups, and everything along that line. So therefore, the Ministry of Health needs to have programs and advertisements encouraging men to go get tested and screened. They need to advertise the dangerous illnesses men face, example, prostate cancer. With less males than females in my constituency, I can't afford to see the numbers drop even more. But how are we supposed to help our males if the government think it brilliant to deduct almost $525 million from the Ministry of Health? It was said that the Ministry of Health has the biggest budget, but yet my constituency suffers with a health center so poor that all emergencies and dire cases are sent to the San Fernando General Hospital, as I stated before. I'm positive other constituencies face the same problem. The Ministry of Health is not a bank to withdraw money from.
I now call upon the Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam Speaker, I thank you graciously for allowing me to enter into this prestigious debate. However, it is with a heavy heart that I mourn the loss of common sense which has seemed to escape some members of the opposition. For being of an acute...
Speaker, Standing Order 48.6, the member is imputing improper motives towards the members of the opposition.
Member, I ask that you please retract your statements.
Consider the statement retracted, Madam Speaker. Please allow me to continue.
Member, you may.
Thank you. Now, I am a bit befuddled, Madam Speaker, as to why the member of Barataria would elaborate so eloquently on all the programs that would be retracted from the use of her constituency when we would have previously stated by the Minister of Finance that these programs and the only programs that would be affected under the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs is the Elite Assistance Athlete Program. Furthermore, I would also like to question how many members of the opposition would have also called into consideration why we were not allocating funds to the Community Assistance Program when we would have on many occasions, Madam Speaker, in great depth, spoken about how many other community assistance programs are available under all the other ministries, inclusive of my very own ministry, where we have a women's program under our employment relief program, Madam Speaker, where we train and provide women with skills that are set to their needs and give them employment, Madam Speaker. Furthermore, I would also like to bring into this House consideration of the number 1318. Why is this number important? This number is important, Madam Speaker, because in 10 years, Lavington West has seen 1318, that is 1,318 murders, 1,232 of which are related to gun violence. That is a great number, Madam Speaker. And it is a number that concerns me because it reflects that for my constituency, toxic masculinity is not a concept, but a culture, and it is one that needs to be addressed by this House. Under the quality education provisions that the Minister of Education would have promoted, we are able to address such toxic masculinity by teaching boys how to be good men, expressing their emotions, engaging in conversation, engaging in healthy practices in terms of regulating their anger and in terms of dealing with conflict resolution, Madam Speaker. Hence, I am in full support of giving these funds, attributing these funds to the Ministry of Education. Thank you.
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While we understand the opposition's concerns, I implore them to have some faith that this government and its Minister of Finance has examined all options before bringing this bill here today. Currently, in Trinidad and Tobago, according to the Northwest Regional Health Authority, non-communicable diseases have been prevalent in persons, especially under the age of 45 years, with heart disease and diabetes being the leading cause of death. This is a direct result of unhealthy lifestyle choices. As they say, prevention is better than cure. We aim to promote awareness with the Ministry of Agriculture to the public via social media campaigns, radio ads, and free testing. The already installed mobile application, YWiLTT, also provides first-hand communication with the population to encourage healthy lifestyle choices and tips to prevent and control chronic non-communicable diseases. Furthermore, we have already taken extensive measures to ensure that every citizen is aware of the ways to reduce the risk of COVID-19 virus and already have designated isolated areas and quarantine units in place. As the opposition stated so many facts on domestic violence, the one thing they fail to facilitate or comprehend, I would say, is the fact that domestic violence is directly correlated with obesity, substance abuse, mental health issues, teenage pregnancy, and women's reproductive health. Therefore, the money allocated to the TTPS, I am positive, would create a domino effect within our healthcare system. Is this not prioritization? This would allow us to have additional resources to allocate in many different areas, such as continuing the services at the Mount Hope Women's Hospital. Madam Speaker, I know a topic of concern would be the understaffing and decreased productivity within hospitals. Therefore, I propose a pilot study of a case management program where we would allow medical sciences students as part of community service to help alleviate bottlenecks in patient care and waiting times by assisting in filling out patient forms, essentially with the elderly and differently abled. This would alleviate the possibility of misdiagnosis, as according to Hopkins Medicine, the number of patients suffering misdiagnosed related injury or death annually in the US ranges from 80,000 to 160,000 annually. In collaboration with the Ministry of Community Development, we aim to have programs to empower communities where stay-at-home members of the community would receive free first aid training, free training in family conflict management, and training in spotting signs of physical abuse so as to assist the TTPS in an effort to combat this gender-based violence. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Chaguanas East.
I thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute today. Before I begin, I would like to commend the government for their efforts towards achieving gender equality. I agree that it is only through gaining knowledge and learning about equality as part of general education would it become normalized for this gender equality mindset to be achieved, as long as it is taught in an effective manner. However, as mentioned before, the proposition has also called for reductions to be made to the budgets of multiple ministries, including the Ministry of Health. Although it is understood that funding is necessary for budgets to be increased to the specified ministries, the Ministry of Health is one of the most crucial. Although it already has one of the highest budgets among the other ministries, a decrease in funding would lead to drastic changes nationwide in an area where the country is observed to be already struggling. As a medical professional myself, simply personally visiting the various health facilities as often as I do, must I bring to your attention the fact that almost all the medical facilities in Trinidad and Tobago are run down, understaffed, and unable to meet the needs of the people. All situations that would continue to be prevalent no matter how educated the population becomes. According to a Newsday article by Mr. Kiran Mohammed on the 8th of August 2019, there is a constant shortage in the number of beds available for patients, where there's an overflow of over 20 patients awaiting beds daily, resulting in patients being left in harsh conditions for hours before being properly treated. Not only is this unprofessional, but medically many times leads to the worsening of conditions or development of healthcare-associated infections. Additionally, there is also a lack of various medical drugs, vaccines, and even personal protection equipment in the country, which should be understood as a major problem as people are left vulnerable and unable to get the necessary medications to treat their conditions. With situations such as these in existence, the population is at a greater risk of being vulnerable to infections, such as that of most concern right now, COVID-19. In regard to the facilities themselves, the buildings and equipment are not maintained as regularly as they should, resulting in necessary medical equipment to frequently be breaking down and patients having to seek care privately, something that not everyone can afford. Many times, facilities are understaffed due to budgeting, and the staff are overworked, negatively affecting both the medical professionals and patients. What about the women and men who now have to take on extra shifts due to this budget cut, barely getting time to see their families and constantly putting themselves at risk for others? What about people whose conditions worsen beyond treatment while having to wait just to get a bed? What about the children with their immune system still developing, being put at risk due to higher risk of infections nationwide? Thus, I conclude, a decrease in budget towards the Ministry of Health will only make these situations and many more to worsen. If anything, this should be one of the ministries that should be given an increase, as these problems alone are enough to prove that things are not as in control as we need it to be, especially with the looming threat of COVID-19 in the air. We are not ready for such a major threat. I thank you for the time to give my contribution.
Minister of Public Administration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to this debate. So as we all know, Madam Speaker, or hopefully we all know by now, the Beijing Platform for Action, established in 1995 in Beijing, China, and which allowed gender activists, gender equality activists from Trinidad and Tobago to witness the booming of and the creation of the platform, imagines a world in which women and girls everywhere would be able to exercise their freedom of choice, the freedom to choose a life without violence, a life which enables them to go to school, to participate in decision-making, a life that enables equal pay for equal work. Madam Speaker, the vision of the platform is to accomplish equality in all dimensions of life. However, yet no country has finished this agenda. Madam Speaker, changing this statistic is the purpose of the well-thought-out reallocation of funds proposed by the Minister of Finance in order to boost the efforts of the TTPS and develop programs such as the Climate Smart Agriculture and other general health, education, and sex education programs, among others. Madam Speaker, as Minister of Public Administration, I fully support the finance variation of appropriation for the financial year 2020. In collaboration with the Ministry of Education, the appointment of additional funds would not be wasted as it facilitates a more gender equitable curricula and opportunities for both boys and girls to participate in various subjects mentioned by the Minister of Education. Madam Speaker, women and girls' involvement in ICT, which is Information Communications Technology, and STEM subjects is crucial in leveling the playing field and allowing for gender equality and equity in these booming areas. However, according to a study presented by the Office of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, February 2020, women in STEM still make up less than 31% of the global population involved in these areas. Madam Speaker, should we keep funding program after program and leave our girls behind? Madam Speaker, as Minister of Public Administration, public sector organizations such as the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean Association of National Telecommunications Organization hosted events throughout 2019-2020 for 50 female students to be involved in STEM. But Madam Speaker, I propose that this is not enough. As member of the opposition for Caroni Central mentioned, the Ministry of Education, the member of Caroni East mentioned that the Minister of Education said leave no man behind and male are underachieved in this area. However, that is simply not true. Gender does not only mean females, but also both male and female. Therefore, we propose by providing...
Expired. Member for St. Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Women are a proxy for intimate partner violence. Women are a proxy for reproductive rights. These quotes were taken from the UN 2020 social norm and unfortunately demonstrate the harsh reality of how women are viewed in society. Gender-based violence, GBV, is one of the most devastating human rights violations today, and is a serious public health issue. The Ministry of Health must therefore have such a budget to enable their primary care facility, Mount Hope Hospital, to execute their critical role in providing acceptable, available, and quality service. By reallocating this held budget, it will be a major obstacle and a detriment to the fulfillment of rights and access to healthcare, especially in St. Augustine, where the majority of the constituents seek healthcare in Mount Hope Hospital. According to UN Women Global Database, in 2017, 54.1% of the women in Trinidad and Tobago reported that they experienced violence during pregnancy. According to the Children's Authority in 2018, 4,451 reports were made. 50.9 were made from girls and 49.1 were made from boys. These statistics not only demonstrate the dependence, but it demonstrates the practicality of the health services for both women and men. If these already limited health services are cut, where will the people seek health care? If free contraceptive services are not provided, how will our young women be protected? Will we send them to hospitals with insufficient services? Now, I must admit, at this point in time, I'm a bit confused as to whether it is the government is still living in Trinidad or if they are sleeping on the job. I firmly believe that the Minister of National Security has forgotten that gender equality must consider both males and females, and I therefore ask, what is taking place at YTRC? What is taking place at the remand yard? I would like to emphasize the point that these men and women there are remandees. They are pre-trial detainees. They have rights. They have their presumption of innocence, and yet are kept there for 10 to 20 years, where some are even lost in jail, as stated in Wendell, Beckel, and AG. Justice, it is a thread which runs through all the SDGs. It is key to development. It is key to gender equality. And yet our government here today has a blatant disregard for access to justice. I quote from the Guardian article titled, "Women Prisoners Claim Abuse." Crying, pleading, forcibly dragged, hog-tied, we are remanded, we are living with rats, cockroaches. So many prisoners affected by fever, skin rashes, and we are not taken to the hospital. The Ministry of Health wants to cut the budget and yet cannot provide basic services for these men and women. They cannot provide sanitary pads for these women, and yet they still want to cut the budget. According to the Joint Select Committee on Remandees 2018, between 2012 to 2016, 245 remandees were diagnosed with mental health issues. The main recommendation from this report was that the Minister of National Security should work and seek assistance from the Minister of Health to expand their programs and services. I reiterate, seek assistance, and yet the government here today still wants to reduce the Ministry of Health's budget. I say to the government, wake up and examine the reality which exists in Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Member for Chaguanas Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to enter this debate. I would first like to start by commending every one of you here today for your vested interest into the development of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, my previous colleagues in their various ministries have already highlighted the myriad of benefits that comes from the amendment of this bill. So I am not here to repeat today, but I'm here to reiterate on why my constituency endorses the redirection of these funds. One of the pertinent benefits derived comes from the reallocation of funds from the health sector to the TTPS. Now, in just late 2019, the TTPS has released a report that 10,810 crimes were in Trinidad and Tobago. 2,685 of them were from central Trinidad alone. That is a quarter of the crimes. If this is not a cause for grave concern, Madam Speaker, I don't know what is. More relevant for the reason we gathered today, 352 of those belonged to sexual offenses. 82 of those were from Chaguanas. And how, Madam Speaker, does it reflect when the UNDP reports prevalence data for violence against women with statistics such as 30% for intimate sexual partners violence and 19% for non-sexual violences? Is this how we want the world to see how we protect our women in Trinidad and Tobago? In addition to that, it is understood that the unfortunate norm is that a vast amount of victims still do not come forward. So this amount that I call is subject to be even more. This is why I believe that it is critical for the TTPS to receive more funding so they can be a more efficient, trusted unit citizens could rely upon when it is needed. A force to protect our nation in its entirety, both men and women. I understand the concerns of the opposition with a lump sum transfer of that size. However, we have it under control, and this bill would not have been proposed had we not seen it feasible. All this government is seeking to do is efficiently redistribute our resources. Secondly, on my agenda, I was very pleased to see the consideration of funding allocated to the agriculture sector. Now, I'd like to draw this House's attention to the closure of Carney Limited in 2003, when roughly 13,000 employees were laid off. My constituency suffered gravely as they relied on agriculture for growth, substance, and economic buoyancy. The EU delegation to Trinidad and Tobago on their research in the socio-economic baseline of sugar-related activities revealed a report that 7,680 households were affected. More than 400 of those came from my constituency, Chaguanas, alone. Citizens, both men and women, still struggle to get back on their feet after this. Also take into consideration the recent closure of Petrotrin, in addition to the influx of migrants due to the Venezuelan crisis. We have an unemployment problem. Madam Speaker, we have all the factors for production. We have the land, we have the labor, we have the skill, and should this bill be proposed, we have the capital to fund into the agriculture sector. I should remind this House that this is not only provide employment to both men and women, but it also alleviates for food security, increases the additional substantial income for the government, a total increase in GDP from a boom in both upstream and downstream industries, decreased import bills. It assists with the current climate change crisis. It improves the standard of living, and I can go on and on. But for these reasons, Madam Speaker, this is why Chaguanas Central stands alongside our Minister of Finance for the amendment of this bill. Thank you for your time.
Member for Mayaro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to contribute. Firstly, I would like to start off by commending the government for taking the initiative to invest in our women farmers in rural areas. Through this investment, I can see how my constituency, Mayaro Rio Claro, would benefit. However, up to this date, no form of statistics or evidence has been proven or released to show how exactly our farmers are going to benefit from this, as well as how many female farmers exist. Based on a survey I conducted in my constituency among the farmers, the issue of having a poor drainage system always results in flooding. I mean, with intense rainfall from climate change, water is expected to rise. However, if we do not have a proper drainage system, where will the water run off to? Farmers usually take 4 to 6 months to recover from battling floods and crop loss. Just imagine if a country floods twice in 1 year, Madam Speaker, what exactly is the government going to do to support these farmers, and what really can they survive on if they lose everything in one flood season? As we go back, I believe that the government should reconsider and open the program to support both male and female farmers in rural areas, since not only females are affected by floods and crop loss. On another note, Madam Speaker, as it pertains to cutting half of the community development program, according to the Rio Claro Mayaro Municipality final report, education attainment in my area is as follows. Primary education is 39.7%, secondary education stands at 36.6%, and in the minority, we have 3.7% for tertiary education. Madam Speaker, in my constituency, mainly the older persons pursue community education programs, such as the small-scale agriculture course. With this course, they learn how to basically grow their own goods, as well as how to market their goods in terms of selling their products, in which they earn money to reduce their household expenditures. As we can see in rural areas, household incomes are very low. While I understand the government wishes to promote sustainable development, is it necessary to reduce a community development program, leaving hundreds of persons across the country limited to accessing certain courses? Madam Speaker, would this not leave a strain on the government in the long run? Lastly, Madam Speaker, reducing the amount of stipends given to athletes. Lastly, Madam Speaker, on reducing the amount of stipends given to athletes, a document outlined by the Commonwealth titled Enhancing the Contribution of Sport to Sustainable Development recognizes sports as an enabler of sustainable development and peace, since sport is being used to promote physical and mental health, as well as a platform to promote gender equality. Madam Speaker, sports in Mayaro has been given a major boost, in that my constituency has so many upcoming athletes that will take Trinidad on the map for sports. Just to name...
Has expired. I now call upon the Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to enter this debate. In the words of Calypso Rose, just leave me alone. I am going home, because the TTPS and this government will not stand down. We will stand boldly in defense of all victims of gender-based violence, from which the majority are women. While I understand the opposition's fears and concerns in light of the threat of the coronavirus, it seems that they fail to recognize that the health of our nation depends directly on the safety and well-being of our women. Madam Speaker, to put it Simply and perhaps rather crudely, the TTPS has a lot of work to do, and we need a lot of money to do it. Increased funding allows us the opportunity to bolster the work of the recently established Gender-Based Violence Unit through our hotline 800-SAVE, so we can have round-the-clock dispatchers available and ready to respond. We will purchase 50 new vehicles, which will be specially reserved for these cases, improve community policing, and conduct intensive gender sensitivity training so that our police stations become friendly spaces where our women will feel comfortable and our men will not fear ridicule in reporting violence. We will also collaborate with the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services for better surveillance of safe houses, and under our government, we will see the establishment of the first ever safe houses for men and victims from the transgender community. Madam Speaker, financial auditing will be continued with internal controls to ensure that every dollar is accounted for. And while this process will cost us millions of dollars now, it will save us billions in the future. We will also work in close collaboration with the Attorney General to amend the Domestic Violence Act so we can act more effectively, as well as the Police Service Act to penalize officers who do not follow up on reports of domestic violence. Research shows that victims are at the highest risk when they decide to leave an abusive relationship. In order to address this issue, we will be implementing a GPS tracking bracelet, which alerts the victim as well as the police service if the perpetrator comes within 5,000 feet of the victim. Smart watches will also allow victims to simply press a button to send a distress signal so that the police can be immediately alerted of their location, listen in to what is going on, as well as respond immediately. Madam Speaker, there can simply be no opposition in the face of the bloodiest times in our country's history. While it might be too late for the 11 women who were killed, including Rachel Logan, a mother of 3 who was brutally hacked to death in Quarry Village, Superior, only a few miles from where I grew up. It is not too late for us to work together to stem the tide of violence. The time for us to join hands in the fight against gender-based violence is now. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to join in this debate. Madam Speaker, I can only imagine what those school students experienced when they witnessed their principal on the first day of school in January 2020 being a victim to gender-based violence. I can only imagine what that 10-year-old boy experienced just 2 weeks ago in South Trinidad when he found his mother lifeless due to gender-based violence. Headlines in the Jamaica Observer newspaper stated, and I quote, "A third woman allegedly killed by an ex-lover in Trinidad and Tobago this year." This was dated on the 11th of January 2020, just 11 days into the new year, and there were already 3 deaths in this country due to gender-based violence. Madam Speaker, I can only imagine what the family members and friends of these victims have experienced. But let me take the opportunity now to commend the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Gary Griffith, on taking initiative to curb this occurrence as he implemented a gender-based violence response unit of the TTPS on January 21st this year. But, Madam Speaker, more can be done. Therefore, I want to move away from just imagining and propose to the government practical initiatives that can be done to curb this occurrence of gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Initiatives that do not include redirecting money from ministry to ministry. In the 2019 budget allocation, the Ministry of National Security got the second highest allocation of $6.1 billion. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of National Security has ample money which can be fueled into the TTPS. So why is the government bringing us here today to discuss taking money from ministries with less money to give to the TTPS when the Ministry of National Security can't do this? Is this a reverse Robin Hood story? Take from poorer ministries and give to richer ministries? Madam Speaker, this bill is clearly frivolous and vexatious. It is childish, tenuous, vacuous, which is an adequate reflection of this government. Even Stevie Wonder could see that. Now, the member for Chaguanas highlighted that 2,000 plus crimes were reported in her constituency. The Ministry of National Security has that amount of money from the budget allocation, but yet their own government minister is complaining about their inefficiency to use it. Interesting. I heard the Minister of National Security just speak about all these wonderful proposals that she has in store once the money is redirected to the TTPS. But wasn't a gender-based violence response unit implemented with existing finances? So why can't other initiatives be implemented with the same existing finances? In fact, Madam Speaker, over the 4+ years that this government has been in power, the Ministry of National Security has always had one of the highest budget allocations. Where has this money been going? Because quite frankly, crime is still very high in Trinidad and Tobago. What is most puzzling to me is why such a sudden vested interest in 2020 by the government to do all these grand and great initiatives and to stand boldly and not stand down, according to the Ministry of National Security, concerning gender-based violence. Is this an early election scheme to woo the population into thinking that the government is getting it done? I know that the smart citizens of Trinidad and Tobago will not fall for these wooing schemes by the government, but we will rise and understand that this government clearly needs a lesson in financial management and a lesson in inclusion. Because, as the Minister of Finance in her contribution stated, the budgets in Trinidad and Tobago have been debated with a lack of consideration for gender equality. But the entire basis of this debate is centered around gender inequality. Because why would the government propose a gender-responsive debate, yet exclude an entire gender? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Communications.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my residents are afraid. The Express newspaper on January 18, 2020, reported that residents of Arima and surrounding communities such as my constituency of YWiL are bound in fear and confusion. A spike in violent crime since the start of the year has put the community on edge. There have been 9 murders, 3 unsolved shootings, and 2 police killings in the YWiL, Malabar, and Arima Old Road area since the year began. My residents believe that the police aren't doing enough to help slow crime in the area. No, this is not to say that the TTPS aren't working hard in the country. But, Madam Speaker, I believe more has to be done within the community themselves to address the issues of gender-based violence and abuse. Madam Speaker, my colleague touched on the topic of community policing, and as the member for YWiL, I believe that this approach would be very beneficial to my constituency. This will be able to form a lasting bond and trust between police and residents, something that is evidently missing in my constituency. It would also be able to foster mentorship opportunities for the disadvantaged men and women in my area. Madam Speaker, the reality is that it is either positive mentorship or negative mentorship. Community police mentorship or criminal mentorship. Statistics from the TTPS reported 7,000 cases of domestic abuse between 2008 and 2015. And 1 in 3 women will suffer violence at the hands of a partner. Now, many of these cases could have been prevented if the perpetrators were given access to education, not necessarily in schools, but via community policing, which includes the use of the police youth clubs. They facilitate mentorship, education, life skills, re-socialization, and values for boys and girls. My ministry, partnering with other relevant ministries, can reach out to police youth clubs and community groups,
in the surrounding areas to help disseminate all the information on programs and initiatives that this government is trying to implement to address gender-based violence. Madam Speaker, the nurses have a strong relationship in the community via the hospitals and health centers, and one of the avenues they employ is that of education. The nurses have earned the trust and the respect of the community and are listened to. In similar fashion, I would want this same relationship between my residents and, by extension, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and the police. Madam Speaker, in truth and in fact, these policies cannot work without sufficient funding. What is the cost of reduction of fare in our communities? How much would you allocate to prevent hundreds of lives from going to the hospital for regular trips of abusive incidents? What is the price of safety? Just because money is being reallocated does not equate to neglect. And if this money is needed to do so, I say it is money well spent. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for San Fernando North.
Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to make my contribution. After consulting with family members and teachers of my district, I have learned that in several denominational and co-ed schools, students are not exposed to both traditionally masculine and feminine subjects, such as technical drawing and food and nutrition, respectively. Therefore, I would like to suggest, rather than implementing new programs, the Minister of Education amend the curriculum so that students would have the opportunity to be exposed to these areas from the Form 1 level. I would like to point out, Madam Speaker, that there are several persons who have made their mark in cooking, which is deemed as a traditionally feminine subject, such as Chef Jason Peru and the members of the Caribbean National Culinary Team, which consisted of 4 boys and 3 girls that represented Trinidad and Tobago at the Taste of the Caribbean, which was held at the Hyatt region in Miami and won for the 7th time. Madam Speaker, I would also like to point out that I stand here as a female that did a traditionally masculine subject, technical drawing, and excelled. Madam Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the Minister of Education for wanting to promote gender equality through gender-responsive budgeting. However, before this is done, the right institution needs to be developed. From personal experience as a past student of San Fernando East Secondary School during the period of 2013 to 2018, at the Forms 4 and 5 level during the period of September 2017 to November 2017 and October 2018 to November 2018, the school was closed due to water and electrical problems, respectively. As a current student of Daybay Secondary School, the current sewage issue that has prevented many students from attending due to fear of being sick and being sent home early, which has happened a number of times. Also, Madam Speaker, taken from the Newsday on Friday, the 10th of January 2020, the Point 14 East Secondary School Parents and Teachers Association is concerned that repairs have not been done, which was supposed to be done over the Christmas holidays. The PTA warned that if steps were not taken, they will have no choice but to close the school. The work to be done included the repair of the ceiling along the corridor and the classrooms, the repair of the gas system of the science labs, and the demolition of Block E, which is a condemned building, which was identified for demolition since 2007, Madam Speaker. Taken from the Newsday on Friday, the 13th of September 2019.
Member, please be guided by Standing Order 48.1 and align your contribution with the bill at hand.
Taken from the Guardian, from the local Newsday on Friday, the 13th of September 2019, Standard 5 students secretly made recordings when they were being abused by their teacher. One student was even hit with a ruler across his face. Through you, Madam Speaker, I would like to ask that the Minister of Education what she has in place to manage the situation, given that corporal punishment was abolished from both primary and secondary schools. When the institutions are not suitable for learning, how are students expected to pass their CSEC and KF exams? What is the Minister of Education doing to address these issues? And why should the opposition support the motives of the government to promote gender equality when they cannot fix current issues that are currently existing? Thank you, Madam
Time
Chair.
has expired. I'll now call upon the Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Madam Speaker, for decades, scientists and environmentalists have warned us that we must address climate change. Locally, our very own Sasha Jatan Singh, an environmental consultant, in an interview with the Newsday in 2018, warned that critical decisions will have to be made in the next decade as climate change poses a most existential threat to the future. So this morning, I must commend our Minister of Finance, as this proposed bill and its allocations shows that she is taking that critical decision, which Ms. Jatan Singh highlighted. However, in the same breath, I must lambast the opposition, including the opposition leader, who stated that we must act for the betterment of all, yet seem not to be bothered to take heed of the advice of experts and the plight of those vulnerable sectors in our society who will be most affected by our flooding situations. My Ministry of Housing is specifically invested in this bill for the proposed implementation of climate-smart agricultural practices, as the sustainability of housing in Trinidad and Tobago is under threat by flooding, which is being exacerbated by climate change. The 2019 Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies report deems climate change an urgent threat to housing. Yet, with great challenges, we must implement great strategies to combat them. With these climate-smart practices, we can do that. The Food and Agriculture Organization defines these as sustainably increasing agricultural productivity and resilience to climate change, whilst also reducing and removing greenhouse gas emissions. What this means is that climate-smart practices introduce a twofold approach to climate change. Not only will we be reducing our contribution to climate change, but we will also be supplying the men and women who utilize their land to provide food to our nation with unprecedented levels of crop security and livelihood security. Additionally, with these climate change responsive methods, the Ministry of Housing can increase efforts to afford the pleasure of home ownership to citizens who find it difficult to afford home ownership on the private market. And why is that? Because although my ministry provides lower income families with programs such as the 2% subsidized mortgage at TTMF and home improvement grants, which reduce the high demand for poverty, every year without fail, due to flooding, we are faced with providing more housing grants and more housing units to those families who already have property, who now need new homes. These resources and programs, Madam Speaker, are ideally to be afforded to persons who are not yet homeowners. I end, Madam Speaker, by stating that today I urge that our decisions err on the side of sustainability, not just because the housing industry is under threat, but also because it is our duty as democratically elected representatives of society to ensure that every individual is afforded their constitutional right to the peaceful enjoyment of their property. And this bill seeks to secure this now and for the future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Couva North.
The government of Trinidad and Tobago suggests seeking partnerships within the private sector to compensate for the lower stipends offered to athletes due to the budget cut in the Elite Athlete Assistance Program. Madam Speaker, research shows both financial and symbolic consequences of gender inequality in sports, as Forbes released its 2019 annual look at the world's highest paid athletes, and the top 100 showed a stark contrast in pay between professional male and female athletes, where Serena Williams was the only female on that list, and even then, she was tied for 63rd ranking with a male baseball player. Private sector sponsors for female athletes would be harder to acquire due to gender discrimination and idolization of male athletes, leaving this already marginalized group at a greater disadvantage for achieving success due to a lack of resources. In fact, both male and female athletes who experience financial challenges would be more susceptible to low performance and at a higher risk for developing injuries due to inadequate professional coaching, medical and nutritional supplies, travel expenses, and accommodation for training, all of which are significantly covered by the funding from the Elite Athlete Assistance Program. Despite being supported with limited resources, Trinidad and Tobago's leading female sprinter, Michelle Lee Ahi, made history as the first woman to capture gold at an international event, which was the 2018 Commonwealth Games, then winning silver at the Pan American Games last year. Imagine what our athletes could accomplish with adequate funding. While delivering the feature address at the 3rd Annual Leadership Forum in October last year, our Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs said, and I quote, "Sport is a powerful platform for promoting gender equality, empowering women and girls, developing communities, improving society, and advancing the national development agenda. For this reason, the National Policy on Sport emphasizes total participation in sport and aims to expand the reach of sport, making it accessible to all, cutting across physical ability, age, and of course, gender." Madam Speaker, I am therefore confused by the Minister's contradiction, and I'm forced to question if my esteemed colleagues on the other side have not only neglected gender equality in sport, but have not considered the negative implications it will have on our youth. My constituency of over 30,000 members greatly appreciate and highly utilize our indoor sporting arena, and we work closely with our youth officers at the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs to create a safe, fun, and competitive environment for youth to come and engage in a variety of sports productively. Madam Speaker, the sad truth is, with the decrease in resources, there can be an expected decrease in athletes performing and achieving success in major sporting events, nationally, regionally, and globally. How are we to promise the youth a bright future in sports when we are taking away the present opportunities from the athletes they look to for inspiration? I thank you, Madam Speaker, for contributing today.
Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs.
The Ministry of Sport passionately supports this bill, which allocates funds to the incredible initiatives of the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, and the TTPS. With these extra funds, the Ministry of Education can introduce more non-traditional sports such as hockey, cheerleading, and rugby, just to name a few. I believe that the introduction of these sports will not only benefit the future female athletes of Trinidad and Tobago, but also encourage male participation, thus breaking gender barriers in the sporting industry of our country. The reallocation of funds to the Ministry of Agriculture will be used to fund the construction of sanitary bathroom facilities for female farmers, which in turn promotes the safety and comfort for our already existing farmers. Madam Speaker, I understand the concerns of my colleagues on the other side, but I can assure you the elected government has it under control. The remaining funds allocated to my ministry is simply sufficient. As it stands, our world-renowned sporting facilities remain an incredible figure of sport tourism. My ministry is committed to continuously providing financial support to outstanding athletes through the Elite Athlete Assistance Program and also partnering with the private sector to further subsidize these programs. I would like to remind you. Sorry, Minister, I am pressed for time. No. I would like to remind you our ministry's recurrent expenditure for fiscal year 2017-2018 was $260,438,382, which was allocated to personal expenditure, goods and services, minor equipment purchases, current transfers, and subsidies. Though this increased by 7.5% in 2018-2019, this still does no harm to my ministry's programs. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Kumutu.
Speaker, the Ministry of Sports and Youth Affairs is mandated to coordinate and facilitate the delivery of quality developmental services to our athletes. This bill threatens this. We need to stop treating sports as a social service and recognize it as a striving industry. An economic impact assessment conducted by the organizers of the Caribbean Premier League reported that the 2016 CPL tournament generated $20.4 million in visitor spending. This is only a partial picture of the potential of our sports tourism, which can greatly contribute to our economic development. So why is it that the government is not capitalizing on this, but instead taking a reactionary response by cutting the funds from the Elite Athletes Association program? The government may think that we can survive this budget cut, but according to the article by Sports Desk, National Amateur Athletic Association President Mr. Serrett has admitted that 2019 was a difficult year, saying, "The record will show that Trinidad and Tobago has won 17 Olympic medals and 14 came from track and field. We must feel cheated where funding is concerned." Since there is a growth in the success of local athletes on the international stage, why isn't it that there is a growth in funds also? The EAAP stipulates that funds are distributed according to availability of funds of the current fiscal year. How are we expected to ensure that all our athletes can participate in the 2020 Olympics if their stipends are being cut? My colleague on the other side spoke about survival in 2017 to 2018, but we are in 2020. We are setting up our athletes to fail by hindering the quality of their performance by not allowing them to achieve the best coaches and training equipment necessary for their success. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to see that the government is cognizant of the need to revolutionize our systems by creating a gender-sensitive environment. However, this bill will inadvertently put up more roadblocks to this road to gender equality. The EAAP has funded male athletes, female athletes, and athletes in the Paralympic Games and will be attempting to do the same in the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games. The elite boxers are currently seeking funding in preparation for these Olympic Games and still have not received definite confirmation about their attendance in the Olympic qualifiers, which takes place on March 26th to April 3rd. It is near impossible to survive with a budget cut this large. There are about 33 athletes in the EAAP roster, each with their own extensive expenses. Are we asking for another international embarrassment where we sent our women's national team to Dallas for a competition without food and equipment? Madam Speaker, according to the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday 2018, Kellyanne Batiste expressed her concern that young Trinidad and Tobago athletes may not fulfill their highest potential if the issue of funding continues to hamper their development. She too has been a victim of ineffective funding from the government for her expenses in track and field. Ms. Batiste was also mirroring on a similar response from Richard Thompson, who chastised the sport ministry for not being financially supportive of their athletes. He says that athletes feel as though the government is against them. Abraham Lincoln once said that a government is for the people and by the people. Why it is we cannot adopt the same sentiment? Our athletes are crying out to us, yet our undisturbed response is that we have this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to take part in this debate. As Minister of Tourism, I strongly believe that as a nation, the safety of not only our citizens, but the safety of our visitors should be our main priority. Therefore, I believe that this increase is necessary. Madam Speaker, I believe that this increase will not only renew the confidence of the TTPS within the general public, but also in the eyes of the global population and potential tourists. 2015 article, The Impact of Crime on Tourist Arrivals, a comparative analysis of Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, written by UWI heads of Department of Economic and Social Sciences, stated that tourism sustains growth and must be diversified as it is one of the fastest growing industries globally. However, Madam Speaker, despite there being great potential in tourism, increased crime is becoming detrimental to this industry.
Many countries have started warning their citizens to be wary when traveling to our Twin Isles, especially during the season of Carnival, our main tourist attraction. In the year 2018, the Ministry of Planning and Development shared that Carnival visitors spend over $318 million in our country. Therefore, the growing hesitation to visit our nation due to this high crime level will negatively impact our economy. During this time, many people, especially women, are sexually harassed, assaulted, robbed, and murdered. As your government, it is our duty to help make a change to this situation. Might I remind you, Madam Speaker, of a tragic incident which occurred Carnival 2016, where a young woman, Asami Nagakia, a Japanese tourist, was brutally murdered in our country during Carnival. Madam Speaker, as any educated and intellectual person would agree, this proves that drastic measures must be taken. Therefore, the budgetary increase is indeed necessary. Surely, all these improvements will greatly impact my ministry. With more tourists present in our country, our citizens benefit also, as there would be an increase of employment opportunities, hence incomes, affording them better lives, independence, living standards for all our people, both men and women. Madam Speaker, a safer Trinidad and Tobago benefits us all. Surely it will boost tourism, hence it is imminent that it will positively impact the GDP of our country. Therefore, Madam Speaker, for these reasons and more, I believe that this reallocation of funds is necessary, and I stand with my government. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you for allowing me, Madam Speaker, to contribute to this debate. Madam Speaker, the constituency of Oropouche West has over 30,000 people. In this constituency, there is one health center, the South Oropouche Health Center. The San Fernando General Hospital is 14.7 kilometers away, and the Mount Hope Women's Hospital is way beyond that. The General Hospital provides major treatment and admittance of patients, whilst health centers provide the basics. They analyze the patient's complaints, prescribe medication, and then send them home. One health center cannot serve 30,000 people. Reducing the allocation of funds in no way ensures the wellness upholds the universal standard of health. In fact, it reduces the quality and access to systems that support sexual and reproductive health services. According to the budget amendment, the Mount Hope Women's Hospital will seek to be upgraded in 2021, and that is if the government sees it necessary once they're in power. Sexual and reproductive health doesn't only affect families, but rather intimate relationships, communities, and the nation at large. The residents of Oropouche cannot fully access these services for a couple of reasons. One, the availability of these services to them are little, and the actual location for these hospitals with these services require far travels. Madam Speaker, cervical cancer is the leading type of cancer that claims the lives of women. In fact, it is the fourth leading cause of death as reported by the Pan American Health Organization that claims the lives of Trinbagonian women. Yet, there is no HPV vaccine available at the South Oropouche Health Center. And we know that HPV vaccines is a fantastic preventative method to fight and curb cervical cancer. Prostate cancer is the leading cause of death amongst men in cancer. Yet our health facilities don't provide adequate services for screening. The largest urological unit is located at the San Fernando General Hospital with a 24-bed ward, as well as 2 urology theaters staffed by 4 consultants. The Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex and the Port of Twin General Hospital are the only 2 other hospitals with such a service. There is no consistent urological service at Sani Grande and the Point Fortin hospitals. Because of this lack of services and distribution of what is available, the screening for prostate cancer has substantial difficulties. How do the men and women of Orapooch and Trinbago at large save themselves if there are no systems put in place for an early detection rate of cancer? Are we comfortable as a nation to continue burying our citizens when their deaths can be prevented? To do more should not mean to decrease funding from areas that are already failing to ensure that we have the proposed standard of health access as stated in the UNFPA's Multi-Country Program Action Plan, which seeks to integrate sexual and reproductive health services, which, mind you, this government of Trinidad and Tobago has pledged to stand by back in 2015. Having fancy sporting facilities, the best roads, a stellar education system will mean nothing if there's no one to inherit it. The proposed budget amendment is failing Vision 2030 if it reduces the funding towards the Ministry of Health. How do we have sustainable development if we do not achieve the goals we agreed upon? Goal 3 states that we must ensure healthy lives and well-being, and this cannot be done on pittance.
I now call upon the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Referring to the points my colleagues made previously, I would like to reiterate that violence against women and girls is a pandemic. It is visible regardless of cultural context or income status. An unfortunate reality is the prevalence of intimate partner violence around the world, to which Trinidad and Tobago is not immune. Global estimates suggest that 58% of the 87,000 women killed in 2017 were killed by an intimate partner or family member. Here in Trinidad, the estimate is close to 47%. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago continues to be a transit and destination hub for human trafficking, and with that comes sexual exploitation or abuse. Globally, an estimated 75% of trafficking victims are women and girls, of which nearly 3/4 are trafficked for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Madam Speaker, I implore you to recognize change needs to happen in public spaces. Let it be encouraged in our schools, university campuses, work environments, where policies can be put in place and implemented to deal with sexual harassment, abuse, and rape. This means placing a burden on these institutions to educate and protect citizens. It is essential that our police, teachers, and community leaders take action when they hear about violence in homes and community. Madam Speaker, the member for Parlview mentioned that TTPS should be educated and trained, but they should not receive the funds to facilitate that process. I asked how she suggests that we combat the issues if we do not use resources available to help our citizens. This government is dedicated in bettering our community, and promoting gender equality through education will help sponsor a well-rounded future. An expert from the Guardian paper on the 20th of November relates that the body of 6-year-old Kenya Kamabach was found in her apartment in Maloney Gardens in a barrel. Young Kamabach was last seen in the company of a male relative who was still in police custody at the time of the paper's release. For reasons concerning the safety of young women and young girls like Kenya, I agree with the Minister of Finance movement. As the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Energy, I would also like to briefly mention the opportunity to motivate young women in participating in stereotypical male-dominated careers, such as engineers, accountants, facilities managers, to name a few. We need to diversify the energy sector, and I believe by encouraging men to participate in actions towards equality will help change the narrative of angry feminists and angry black women into one that focuses on health, safety, and bettering of our country. Madam Speaker, referring to what my colleagues said about the benefits of allocating additional funds to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, I agree with her statement that female fathers should be allowed more opportunities and resources to work with men. There is a need to diversify the Agriculture, Land and Fisheries Ministry. Women currently do not have the same opportunity or freedom to take advantage of resources to build themselves as farmers. It is a well-known fact that agriculture is largely responsible for food security, and by women not being able to fully utilize the resources is detrimental to our economy. Madam Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to present, and I hope you take everything that was said into consideration.
Member for San Juan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to contribute on this bill before the House today. I would like to start my contribution with a definition of climate-smart agriculture to remind the member of Point 14, and by extension the government, who seems to think that climate-smart agriculture can somehow alleviate flooding. Taken from rainforestalliance.com, and I quote, "Climate-smart agriculture is a way of combining various sustainable methods to tackle the specific climate challenges of a specific farming community," end quote. Now, I welcome and commend the efforts put forward by the government as it aims to improve agricultural sector, as agriculture is a critical aspect of improving our economy through food security. However, I cannot support this bill in its current state. I must point out that the government is being very equivocal as to how they plan to increase the resilience of crops to climate change, especially when it pertains to our dry seasons and rainy seasons. What measures will be put in place to prevent farmers from watching their crops wilt and turn brown year after year, or from feeling hopeless after seeing their hard work be submerged under toxic floodwaters? Now, my friends on the other side may say that the government have been engaging in desilting projects to alleviate flooding, but little to no reform has been done to the pollution issues that not only plague my constituency, but so many others. Can you imagine, Madam Speaker, the idea of providing land ownership access to women without fixing these dire issues at hand? It seems the government is trying to run before it can walk. Madam Speaker, I suggest to the government that efficient clean water supply and measures that target all farmers should be the first steps improving agriculture in this country. According to the worldbank.org, agriculture consumes 70% of the world's fresh water supply. So why is it that just last year, farmers, according to various newspaper articles, are complaining that the San Juan River that is heavily utilized is contaminated, Madam Speaker, due to harmful waste being dumped in and around the river? Madam Speaker, I understand that climate-smart agriculture would eventually be a step in the right direction. But for this to work, it has to address the specific vulnerabilities of different communities. My constituency is neglected when the government is focusing on things like food storage and fodder production. What about trenching, cover crops, vegetation barriers, mulching, proper drainage systems, etc.? Does the government intend to put measures in place to educate farmers, especially the amateurs, on how to find the right combination of sustainable methods to manage their farm's specific climate challenges and how to build resilience to future impacts for their specific crops? Because that, Madam Speaker, is what makes climate-smart agriculture smart. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, I find it very counterproductive that we are here today discussing this bill on climate-smart agriculture, as among other things, when there are so many issues in the agricultural sector that needs to be addressed. Because as M.S. Swaminathan said, if agriculture goes wrong, nothing else will have a chance to go right in the country. I thank you.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are not magicians, but this government understands for government policy to work across any given socio-economic category, it must benefit the average citizen. Therefore, I move to reconstruct and redevelop the 2012 to 2015 Food Production Action Plan that will create long-term employment for low-income bracket females who are at the risk of or experiencing economic instability at the rural constituencies such as Miaro, Moruga, Toco, Sandy Grande, and Tobago East. Madam Speaker, through you, I would like my colleagues on the opposite side to understand that this bill was written after a thorough feasibility study of women in agriculture by laying with the various members of Parliament, along with a widespread consultation with women in rural communities, and not just by hearsay. Madam Speaker, the opposition fails to see that this government does not lack transparency, nor do we intend to allow our existing programs to suffer, but we move towards increasing human capital along with economic development within Trinidad and Tobago. The funds that is being reallocated to my ministry would be used to provide small development loans as an incentive to be self-sufficient in allocating and distributing food to families. I will be working alongside the Ministry of Works and Transport to address poor drainage in constituencies like Miaro and provide proper agricultural access roads and secured bathroom facilities that reduces women's vulnerability in food insecurity. I will be also working with the Attorney General in receiving a policy that gives full benefit and recognition of women's ownership of land. I move to propose a climate-smart agricultural project as women often face a greater burden in responding and adapting to climatic stresses due to a lack of access of land, financial services, social capital, and technology. This project would increase profit and production by improving the resilience of crops. According to the Inter-American Development Bank, Trinidad and Tobago experienced a drought towards the end of 2009 and the beginning of 2010 that led to bushfires destroying the 2010 citrus and cocoa harvest, which declined the economic trade of that particular year. Training programs for fishing, livestock, planting, and harvesting would also be introduced, as it is not a new fact that members of these rural communities are willing to be trained on small-scale agriculture. Seeing that funds are being diverted from sports and youth affairs, these programs can also deter young persons from a life of crime with the benefit of an improved income. By creating better household food security, nutrition, and income for rural communities, this government makes it a part of a revolution towards ending climate change, poverty, and gender inequality in relation to sustainable development goals. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to contribute in this debate. First of all, I commend the government and its attempts to assist the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. However, Madam Speaker, as my fellow parliamentarians have previously asked, where is the statistics to support the government's proposal, Madam Speaker? According to this bill, Madam Speaker, $30,150,418 will be allocated to assist small-scale rural female farmers. Madam Speaker, according to the World Bank, less than 2% of the population represents the female farmers in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I am forced to conclude that the government intends to create an upper class by allocating over $30 million to less than 2% of the population. What about the local rice farmers, Madam Speaker, whose industry is almost on the brink of totally collapsing? What about the dairy farmers? The government has not yet clearly stated what it intends to do to assist these farmers, Madam Speaker. I suspect that the government's refusal to clearly state its intention is a representation of the government's refusal to be held accountable. After all, if a promise is not made, it cannot be broken. Madam Speaker, I must also speak about the farmers in my constituency, the farmers in Couva South. They have been complaining about deplorable roads, poor draining systems, and the lack of water resources. They have been irrigating their crops by water pumped from the drains. Madam Speaker, something must be done to alleviate the situation. Is this really what we are going to allow the plight of our farmers to be? With my good morals and values, I am sorry I cannot subscribe to that.
Madam Speaker, these farmers are also facing the hurdles of competing with foreign imported products that are sold at a cheaper price in the markets. I cannot even begin to understand the frustration that these farmers may be feeling after having invested thousands of dollars into equipment and raw material and hours of intensive labor, only to be pushed aside in the markets by customers who prefer to purchase cheaper goods. Madam Speaker, this cannot be allowed to happen. It is imperative that I also address the elephant in the room: society's perspective on agriculture. Madam Speaker, I have no other choice but to wonder if our history of slavery has been a major contributing factor to the perspective that we have on agriculture today. As supported by local journalist Mr. Wesley Gibbons, once working with the Inter-Press Service Agency, it is important that we embark on a nationwide campaign to change the perspective of citizens' view on agriculture today. Madam Speaker, we must recognize agriculture's full potential and ability to create sustainability and economic stability. We cannot only just target small-scale rural female farmers. All farmers should be considered, whether they are male or female, and their issues must firstly be rectified before we consider the mere 2%. Madam Speaker, many of us have learned that proper prior planning produces predictable results. I cannot even begin to visualize the predictable results of this bill when the government has so clearly failed to properly plan. Thank you.
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Madam Speaker, it seems that the opposition is hell-bent on bringing this honorable House into disrepute by impeding improper motives of the government's interest in gender issues and disregarding the prior solutions provided by my colleagues. But, Madam Speaker, we will not be distracted, we will not be discouraged, or will we be swayed from our course of action. As it was rightfully said before, nothing is new under the sun. Often, we find ourselves revisiting, reattempting, and replicating initiatives and programs of the past, simply because now we are better equipped to execute and implement the objectives and the goals. Madam Speaker, we are not in the business of reinventing the wheel, so why is it that we cannot work on building on the foundation of the existing projects and using them as an example and guide? So, Madam Speaker, I say to my colleagues, let us build. Standing here 25 years after the Beijing Act, we must acknowledge the significant strides that have occurred for the advancement of gender issues in Trinidad and Tobago. We must, however, continue to make difficult and often radical decisions as we chart towards the 2030 vision if we are to achieve gender equality between men and women and support equitable participation in political, economic, social, cultural, and family life. Madam Speaker, in the Trinidad and Tobago's Central Registry on Domestic Violence 2018 data report, 3.38% of victims in my constituency of San Grande Toco reported experience of domestic violence. In a population of roughly 18,000 persons, less than 1% of these reports represented males. Madam Speaker, as stated by my colleagues, we must do more to ensure that men are also included in our gender-based analysis. As such, in the upcoming years, we will be collaborating in multi-sectoral initiatives to ensure that the reallocation of funding does not hinder the success of initiatives. Madam Speaker, in the upcoming 10 years, the economy of San Grande will be driven by the agricultural sector in the form of short crop production, tree crop agricultural livestock production, fisheries in the form of marine fishing and fish farming, and fish and agro-processing. It pleases me that the investments in the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries will assist us in achieving our goal of the development of rural areas and boosting economic activity. Madam Speaker, in the area of San Grande alone, 5.02% of persons who experience domestic violence are unemployed. We must empower our women and men to break the cycle of economic dependence that makes them vulnerable to violent and abusive relationships. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government will collaborate with the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to ensure the effective extension of services across the municipality. We are prepared to assist with the engagement of farm communities in pest control regimes to limit the negative environmental impacts, develop and maintain farm-to-market systems, and provide training and upgrading programs to existing and prospective operations in floriculture. Madam Speaker, let me remind this House that the perpetrators of gender-based violence do not care if we are opposition or government. They do not care. Nationwide, during the period of 2013 to 2018, there were 183 domestic violence-related deaths, of which 54% were female. Madam Speaker, this is a nationwide problem which requires a united response. This is a nationwide problem which requires a united response. We must continue to empower our ministries to improve and provide services and initiatives to assist with the needs of the most vulnerable within our society. No one-size-fits-all approach can be applied to fit the needs of any society. This is not a Caribbean Robin Hood or Cinderella story where the government is whimsically throwing finances from one to the other, or where we are trying on shoes to fit our perfect side of the gender issues. We lived in a land where every creed and race should be able to find an equal place, but though we have a rich socio-cultural and ethnic background, it is often difficult. Madam Speaker, I can assure you that we are working towards writing into our history sustainable solutions to the advancement of gender issues and not a local fairy tale of over-ambitious heights or a mosaic of international policies. I thank you.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to contribute to this very significant debate. First, let me categorically state that I am in complete support of the Finance Variation of Appropriation Bill 2020. I am sure most of us are aware of a quote written by John Donne, which states that no man is an island, no one is sufficient, everyone relies on others. It is on this premise that we, the government, stand united, assiduously working, planning, and realizing the dream of a better Trinidad and Tobago for us all. Contrary to what the opposition would like many to believe, we have done extensive research into gendered responsive budgeting alongside intersectionality, and we are confident that the suggested budgetary alignments in the proposed ministries will effectuate the positive paradigm shifts that we intend to achieve. Unlike the opposition, we are not at all confused. Through the Ministry of Public Utilities, though the Ministry of Public Utilities was not directly affected, I would just like to highlight my ministry's role in supporting advancements in education, agriculture, and national security. In an article titled "Major Study Finds Outdoor Lighting Cut Crime," published by LEDs magazine on March 13, 2018, found that developments which received new lights experienced crime rates that were significantly lower than those without, and led to a 7% overall reduction in murder, robbery, and aggravated assault, as well as certain property crimes. As a ministry dedicated to service excellence in the delivery of public utilities for improved quality of life of our citizenry, we implemented the Street Lighting and Illumination of Public Facilities program. The program started in 2005 and was expanded in 2007 to include public places inclusive of schools, parks, recreational grounds, as well as facilities under the jurisdiction of the RHAs, cemeteries, and police stations. Being a member for Dabadi, I have seen firsthand what this initiative has done for my constituency. I am sure other ministers, even on the opposition, have seen this as well. Speaking specifically to the government's goal of strengthening food security and climate change resilience for small-scale women farmers, my ministry is committed to providing these identified regions with sufficient lighting in order to reduce the occurrence of predial larceny and, as much as possible, the overall safety of all farmers. Simultaneously, improvements in the Water and Sewage Authority's water distribution systems to provide these regions with a steady supply of water is said to be undertaken. This is in response to the member of San Juan's question as well as Couva Salt, so rest assured. This ministry, in partnership with TNTech, will be conducting a Level 1 Energy Audit Training Program scheduled to commence on March 30th, targeting highly motivated young persons between the ages of 16 to 25 who have a strong level of commitment to their self-development. Please note, I did not say young men, giving females an opportunity to penetrate a typically male-dominated field. Though the minimum qualification is 2 CXC passes.
Member, your time has expired. Member Filipino.
Madam Speaker, I find it interesting that my colleagues have spoken over and over again about gender-based violence, but have yet to address the plight faced by those of the LGBTQIA community. Every creed and race does indeed deserve an equal place. As highlighted, yes, the Ministry of Health's budget is large, but an even larger budget is the Ministry of Finance. I then wonder, why is the Minister of Finance unwilling to put her ministry's money where her mouth is and finance this bill? The Ministry of Agriculture is certainly in need of funding and initiatives that can help in destigmatizing the sector, increasing food production, and attaining food security. Food security is a necessity for all citizens' survival. But yet again, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries have received the smallest piece of pie in this bill. The Ministry of Finance gave the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries almost $200 million over the last 2 years, as reported by the Ministry of Finance in its Public Sector Investment Program 2019. Almost $200 million to introduce initiatives and complete a number of projects in 2018-2019. To highlight a few, improvements and upgrades to provide modern physical infrastructure, access roads and water management, provision of irrigation systems and access roads, development of land for farmers. Madam Speaker, even in my constituency, Lopino, one that is agriculture-driven, some members have no access to running water. In 2020, they have to use water from the spring, and other members experience infrequent water supply. I think it is a well-known fact that water is needed to farm. I have female farmers in my constituency, Madam Speaker, but they are discouraged. They are faced with many challenges that the government is yet to address. The conflict of money being invested, yet a lack of results or impact following suits trouble me. And upon further analysis, I wonder, Madam Speaker, it seems as though the ambition of the government is held to a higher regard than that of proper financial management and allocation, and most importantly, data. The Minister of Agriculture, Clarence Rambarat, noted at the 2017 Food and Agriculture Organization's Regional Roundtable that planned production needed to be implemented in the agriculture sector, and that data-driven decisions were a major deficiency for this industry. So the opposition appeals to the government once more before this funding is granted. Where's the supporting data? Because it seems as though the Minister of Finance is just eagerly interested in throwing hard-working taxpayers' money as a problem, without first having done or presented proper supporting data for this policy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for recognizing me in this debate. As Malcolm X once said, education is a passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Madam Speaker, the energy sector is reliant on individuals who are willing and able to contribute towards the production and supplying of the energy, such as fuels and renewables. This therefore means quality education is required. Our nation, and by extension, the population of the world, is dependent on one's ability to learn So to ensure our future, education is not only needed, but necessary. Promoting gender equality through education gives equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities for both males and females. This takes into consideration the interests, needs, and priorities of both sexes. This is crucial to accelerate sustainable development within this country. A budgetary increase in the education sector would therefore help to advance our country's economic growth, as my colleague Minister of Education mentioned. In addition, the country grows socially and is able to build sustainable systems throughout leading economic prosperity. According to the Trinidad and Tobago Central Statistical Office, women make up approximately 41% of the national workforce. However, women are underrepresented in the energy sector, accounting for less than 20% of the workforce, as mentioned by the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago. Is this small percentage due to lack of encouragement to enter this sector, or having little to no female role models in this sector? Furthermore, Madam Speaker, the use of renewable energy continues to grow across the Caribbean region. By 2021, this government aim is for 10% of our electricity supply to come from renewable sources. To achieve this, we require a more balanced workforce in the energy sector. In an effort to help us meet this goal, promoting gender equality through education, as this bill suggested, would help to create a more sustainable future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Tableland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to participate in this debate. And I quote, "Small seeds grow mighty trees." Madam Speaker, my constituency, a rural community, proudly boasts of its pineapple production right here in Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to support the government in this initiative, but Madam Speaker, I would like to know, has the government really taken into consideration the impact this bill will have on small-scale farmers in rural communities, as most times the money only reaches one targeted area and is not equally distributed and fairly allocated. My interaction with Tableland Pineapple Farmers Association President Mr. Ramsume has shared his sentiments about having food grown locally to promote security in our island, food security in our island. The Pineapple Association has the ability to provide hotels and, by extensions, the market with fresh pineapples to use at their disposal, but the government has failed to realize the importance of locally grown food. In 2017, the government has granted Guyana the provisions to export pineapple and pepper into Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the government claims this bill will support women in rural farming communities like Tableland, but would women be given the opportunity to sit on boards to discuss rural development policies and the effects it has on small-scale women farmers? Would the government provide basic skills training, such as literacy and confidence-building skills, as these are some of the issues highlighted by Canary Policy Brief on empowering rural women entrepreneurs in Trinidad and Tobago? Madam Speaker, I pose questions to the Attorney General. Were women's rights organizations and other civil society groups active on the issues involved in sharing or reviewing the legislation? Is their feedback reflected? If passed, Madam Speaker, how will the bill's implementation be monitored and measured? I thank you.
Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister with a responsibility for gender and child affairs, one of the ministry's strategic objectives is to prevent, punish, and eradicate gender-based violence. Data from the Crime and Problem Analysis Branch of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service revealed that a total of 113 women have been killed in domestic violence situations from 2017 to February 2020. Madam Speaker, many women and girls have fallen victim to the hands of men, and we need to address this crucial problem of domestic violence in our society. Women are being killed by men, and it is my responsibility to see that we do not lose another 113 lives to the hands of these offenders. Madam Speaker, education is the vaccine for violence. We have begun to raise daughters like sons, but few have the courage to raise our sons more like our daughters. With an increase in...
Will the member give way?
No, not at this time. With an increase in funding, the Ministry of Education, in collaboration with Gender and Child Affairs, would be able to provide programs which assist young boys in understanding that they do not have to conform to archaic, aggressive stereotypes of masculinity, which will reduce gender-based crime and domestic violence. The Ministry of Education would also be able to have training for male teachers who are viewed as immediate role models to these students. Madam Speaker, it is completely necessary to show these boys that there are many ways in which strength can be reimagined, as calling out a friend who tells a sexist joke, or resilience can be seen as acceptance of one's vulnerability. However, while we address the men, the measurement of prevalence, adequate research in other domains, and treatment of victims remains a large gap in national service delivery. According to UN Women, an organization dedicated to gender equality and establishing progress in meeting the needs of women, intervention by police is mostly unsatisfactory. After conducting research in my home of Tobago, many victims of domestic violence are afraid to make reports to the police because there may be acts of revenge towards them as a result of making a report or applying for a restraining order. Madam Speaker, the 113 lives that were lost were mothers or females who could have been mothers. There needs to be proper interventions taking place because police responses are extremely inconsistent. They leave women with a sense of neglect, blame, and trivialization. Therefore, I am in full support of an increase in the budget allocation for the TTPS. An increase which would be partially directed to the recently opened gender-based violence unit, which would allow for the unit to achieve its mandate and focus heavily on domestic violence cases and breaches of restraining orders. Madam Speaker, apparently the opposition is ready to put another 113 lives at risk, but I can assure you that the government is not. We are a force for positive change. It has been 113 lives too many, and we are not going to risk another one. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I came here today hoping to be convinced of the logic behind this bill, as I actually commend the government for finally taking a stance on gender-responsive budgeting. But as we come to the end of this debate, I have to address the various inconsistencies found in the prior proposals of the ministers. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I simply cannot support this bill today. The member for Tobago East stated her office's mandate to prevent, punish, and eradicate gender-based violence. But I am simply not convinced that this is what the government is doing. I am extremely glad the Minister of National Security made mention of the Retroactive Domestic Violence Act. But I really wish she would have specifically addressed sections such as 27(1), which still holds that the court has the right to decide whether or not bail is granted to someone who breaches a protective order. If the government fails to focus on preventative measures to eradicate gender-based violence, then I am afraid that we are simply dealing with a reactionary government that is more concerned with an action-only strategy than a preemptive one, Madam Speaker. Based on this concern, I fear that we will have repeat unfortunate occurrences, such as the case of Ms. Nai Singh, where she was unfortunately shot and killed by her ex-husband who had been stalking her for months in spite of the order of protection she obtained toward him. I suggest to the government today, instead of trying to fix a leaky faucet in a burning building, Why not reinstate prevention-based programs like that of the Partnership for Peace Batterers Intervention Program? Why not heed the suggestions made by the Equal Opportunity Commission outlined in a study on gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago by the United Nations in 2018, which in fact indicated that the problem does not exist before, but after the police has already been made aware of an incident? Or, Madam Speaker, is the government simply proposing this bill merely to appease public perception and have not truly done their homework? Lastly, Madam Speaker, how could the member for Tobago East agree to the bill which reduces funding within the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts when she should instead be working with this sector, since her division in particular recently made claim that it is possible to curb gender-based violence through the arts by working with civil society organizations, government ministries and state agencies, which she would know is an effective community outreach tool. And this was also demonstrated in a recent community production entitled Shades of I, She, Every Woman's Story. In closing, Madam Speaker, I beg the government to go back to the drawing board and reassess the various gaps within this bill that simply does not provide long-term solutions for this country, but suggests a hasty response to gender-based issues and the fight toward equality. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the privilege to speak at this historic debate. I must commend the Minister of Finance for exercising the political will to actively improve the livelihood of our citizens through gender-responsive budgeting. Madam Speaker, I'd like to begin with a question for my colleagues. What does the number 7 mean to you? For some of you, 7 might represent fortune, and for the rest of you, 7 might represent luck. But for 7 women in this country, 2020 has been anything but lucky due to gender-based violence. As Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, I have had the pleasure of witnessing our country's commitment to several international agreements which promote the elimination of gender-based violence within our society. These include the Sustainable Development Goals, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Now, whilst these policies generated a plethora of suggestions that can, 1, prevent instances of gender-based violence, 2, treat survivors, and 3, rehabilitate perpetrators, the country has not made significant breakthrough in the implementation of these recommendations. One reason for this is the TTPS's inability to effectively respond to gender-based violence due to financial restraints. In fact, in 2015, the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Diversity, the Environment, and Sustainable Development noted that there were insufficient funds to meet the demands for programs of the TTPS and domestic violence unit.
Can the member give way?
Sure.
Okay, so you just highlighted that the TTPS does not have enough funds, but where is the 6.1 budget allocation that was given in the 2019 budget? Where is that funds going? That was given to the National Security, the Ministry of National Security.
Thank you for the question. I think the better person to answer that would be my Minister of National Security or maybe my Minister of Finance, but we will have that answer for you. Thank you for the question. As I was stating, as such, to ensure the TTPS can operate at its maximum capacity, I am in full support of this budgetary reallocation. Now, this budgetary reallocation can be used for 1, rehabilitation programs, 2, having translators in each police station and offering foreign language classes for police officers to assist migrant victims of gender-based violence, and most importantly, and I continue to stress, the consistent education of our police officers on proper investigative procedures to be applied in gender-based violence and assisting them in understanding gender-based violence. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, a country's greatest resource is its human capital, and we as parliamentarians must do all within our power to ensure that each inhabitant of this country can experience the best that life has to offer, and this should not be hampered by violence of any form or sort.
It is for this reason I am urging you, my colleagues, to do what is right and support this amendment. Do it for your brother, your mother. Do it for yourself. And if not yourself, do it for Gabriella and the other victims of gender-based violence in this country for 2020. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Manzanilla.
Madam Speaker, it's a pleasure to discuss any bill that attempts to address issues faced by different groups within Trinidad and Tobago. I must applaud the government for this attempt. However, I am displeased with the government's attempt to apply gender-responsive budgeting, as their plans do not address adequately the pressing issues that affect specific genders within our society. Madam Speaker, I've objectively listened to the government's contribution, hoping that their plans can curb gender bias and gender-related issues. Because if a gender-sensitive lens is effectively executed, Madam Speaker, it can positively impact Trinidad and Tobago and, by extension, the people of Manzanilla. Madam Speaker, one thing I agree with is a member from Tunapuna, because I would love money to say hello again. And I am sure that's what the persons of Manzanilla were saying in 2014 when they lost most of their produce to the flooding. Madam Speaker, when the River swamp overflowed, the roads collapsed, where were all the plans and where were all the strategies from the government? Madam Speaker, this is just one incident. What about 2017, 2018? Madam Speaker, I can continue. Because over the years, we are seeing a trend. But instead of trying to address the trend, Madam Speaker, they are moving away from the trend and going to say, let's create a program for another issue. But why are we not fixing the issue at hand before we can fix another issue, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, Mr. Omarat Maharaj stated, and I quote, "If it is that in a time of disaster, we become increasingly reliant on imported food sources, it seems to me that the local food production system is both unsustainable and very vulnerable." Hence, I was perplexed, Madam Speaker, while listening to the government minister show so much support for such an absurd policy and plan. Madam Speaker, the harsh reality is males dominate the agriculture industry. This does not mean female farmers doesn't exist. It just means our focus should be on mitigating the struggles faced by farmers and not attempting to marginalize the men who still are interested in positively contributing to our national food security. As the Newsday reported in 2018, our food import bill is at $5.65 billion in 2018, Madam Speaker. Through you, I would love to humor the government. Let's say we distribute lands to the 2% of female farmers. What are we going to do to ensure the floods does not displace them, since we already use our limited resources to create the program to provide for the 2%? Madam Speaker, I am aware that none of the members in this cabinet, including myself, was alive in 1963 to witness our sister as Tobago lost 50% of its agricultural produce to Hurricane Flora, losing its status as the food basket. But through you, Madam Speaker, I would like to inform them that natural disasters are unpredictable, and our geographical location makes us susceptible to such. However, Madam Speaker, I believe it is logical to expect that major goals as it pertains to budget reallocation should be centered around the economic growth and
Member, your time has expired. I will now call upon the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Woman gunned down while on her way to her Laventille residence.
more of a man shot in Leavenworth. Madam Speaker, these are some of the articles from the Newsday and the Trinidad and Tobago Guardian newspapers, respectively on the 19th of July 2019 and the 3rd of February 2020. My constituency has been stigmatized and stereotyped due to the high crime rate over the past few years. Madam Speaker, please allow me to paraphrase a quote from Oprah Winfrey. It is time that we step out of the history that is holding us back and step into a new story that we are willing to create. And this government has been trying its best actively, proactively, to address these issues. To help alleviate the stigma attached to this constituency, a community swimming pool was opened last year in collaboration with the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Sport and Youth Affairs, Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, and the Coast Guard. Although this ministry will be receiving a reduction in funding, the Ministry of Public Utilities is committed to the continuation of subsidizing the supply of water and electricity services at the community pool. This is to ensure that one of our greatest achievements remains a focal point, especially for youths, to foster interactions, teamwork, training, acquisition of knowledge to better impact their community. Additionally, education training in gender-based violence, as mentioned by my colleague in the Ministry of Education, within my constituents and by extension the nation, in eradicating the profoundly rooted toxic masculinity and stereotyping that has negatively impacted our society. In addition, our telecommunications unit, TSCT, collaborated with the PTSC to launch free Wi-Fi services. Access to this service will aid in the reporting of crime, especially through the TTPS app and their initiative, See Something, Say Something. This is inclusive of all the issues faced by our citizens, whether it be gender-based violence, robberies, LGBTQI issues they may have faced. If they see something, say something. Furthermore, the commuting time spent by citizens would be transformed, as once they are able to use this Wi-Fi service, they can use it to better be conducive. For example, school children using the PTSC bus can do research or their homework while commuting home. Madam Speaker, the community I serve has been ravaged by crime, and this is why I'm in full support of this bill, especially with regards to the funding reallocation of the TTPS. It is initiatives like these that offer opportunities for further development in our communities. Thank you for allowing me to contribute today.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to contribute today. Madam Speaker, the government should not decrease the budget for the Ministry of Community Development, Culture, and the Arts. Within the ministry, Madam Speaker, there is a program called the Community Education Program. The program in 2018 and 19 produced over 18,000 well-skilled graduates from over 200 communities, according to news.gov.tt. Madam Speaker, in my constituency, Chaguanas West, there are 5 centers or less that can accommodate these classes, reflecting on the schedule put out by Community Development for this year's program. Madam Speaker, these classes are oversubscribed, and forms for these classes finish within a day. And these are the complaints from my constituents and from personal experience. Madam Speaker, the program has helped persons with self-development, entrepreneurship, growth of the creative industry, and economic growth, according to news.gov.tt. Madam Speaker, according to the Central Statistics Office, labor participation in the second quarter of 2018 showed male participation at 67.8% and female participation at 49.2%, with the average monthly income of employees of $5,758.39, according to the International Labour Organization in 2016. Madam Speaker, based on these statistics, we can tell that this can be a household income for some families. Madam Speaker, these programs are important because it offers men and women the allowance to create their own form of income, whether through a business of their own or to upgrade themselves on a job. I suggest, Madam Speaker, the expansion of centers to facilitate more persons in the communities with well-equipped tools and technology to assist in running of these classes. Together with this, Madam Speaker, I call for proper maintenance of existing tools and facilities already used. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Education spoke on allocating more money to the training of teachers in education. In the fiscal year 2019 budget document, there is $29.2 million already allocated towards training of teachers. Madam Speaker, I would like to know how the current funds is being utilized and why is there a call for more funds? Lastly, Madam Speaker, if you are making resources available, let us make it available for everyone in different sectors of society. Thank you.
I now call upon the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, I am charged with the responsibility of developing communities across Trinidad and Tobago. When considering gender-responsive budgeting, we have to take into account the needs of men, women, boys, and girls. So when the Minister of Finance proposed the reallocation of funds, I too was a bit apprehensive, like many of the opposition members. However, I took a step back and thought about it. The reallocation of funding should not be viewed as budget cuts, but the strategic restructuring and redirection of funding for the betterment of communities across Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Culture, it would be remiss of me not to quote one of our most popular soca songs for 2020, "We Outside from Long Time." Madam Speaker, we went on the community level and we spoke to the citizens that would benefit from some of these programs that we are proposing to implement, and also the persons that would be affected. The needs of men and women will continue being met by the Ministry of Community Development as the skills training program is not being abolished. Although the funding has been reduced for this program, the program will still be equally accessible for men and women across different communities, districts, and divisions across Trinidad and Tobago to develop their skills. Furthermore, the funding that is being redirected from this program is going to the Ministry of Education and will aid in developing educational programs for boys and girls across communities of Trinidad and Tobago. They too should understand that they should have equal opportunities free from gender bias. Madam Speaker, the budget reallocations to the TTPS will aid communities affected by gender-based violence to receive the sensitivity and urgency required to deal with such matters. The budget reallocations to the Ministry of Agriculture will aid the rural communities by educating women to build viable agricultural skills which they can pass on to their children and create a source of income. These training programs can be held at community centers and other well-known community spaces and done in a timely fashion, so while the children are in school, the mothers could be training and they're home back in time to collect their children. This budget reconstruction is a win for the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts because we still see the need for women and men in communities to gain their skills. We see the need for boys and girls in communities to be adequately educated on matters of gender, and we see the need for women in rural communities to benefit from the agricultural program proposed. So this budget reconstruction is a win for communities in Tobago, a win for communities in the East, a win for communities in the West, a win for communities in the North, and a win for communities in the South. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Tabaqueets.
Thanks to you, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues for allowing me the opportunity to contribute to this debate. Firstly, I would like to advise the Minister of Works and Transport, who has boasted about the social programs under her ministry, that it is not as well marketed, not as well subscribed, or not as easily accessible as the skills training program under the Ministry of Community Development, which has had over 11,000 applicants for the year 2019 and over 18,000 graduates for the past 2 years, many who have successfully ventured into home-based businesses. Secondly, as a member with a vested interest in the skills training program, I would like to remind the Minister of Community Development that the vision and mission of a ministry is to create an enabling environment for the development of resilient communities, fostering cultural expression and indoctrinating national pride. While I admire the Minister of Finance for her innovative efforts to implement gender-responsive budgeting policies, I question just how earnest and calculated this motion is. The budget of the Ministry of Community Development is going to be reduced by more than 14% to be reallocated to a ministry with a budget of over $5 billion. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Community Development herself said in April of 2019, in reference to the skills training program, and I quote, "We have seen a strong growth and demand for these courses based on online feedback and feedback from our district offices. These programs are oversubscribed, and we need now, more than ever, the support of private and public entities to come forward to provide opportunities for our citizenry," end quote. However, Madam Speaker, after receiving a $62 million budget reduction for the self-same program, the Minister of Community Development stands here today attempting to convince the members of this cabinet that she is capable of fulfilling her mandate. Okay, the government has proposed that more funding is required for educational reform, but has taken $62 million from an educational program. A program that provides accessible learning opportunities to my constituents, regardless of age, gender, race, educational attainment, socioeconomic status, or religious and political affiliation. The government has approached this motion with a half-picked duck attitude. Explain why the programs earmarked for a reduction in their budgetary allocations are programs that are inherently designed and artfully conceptualized with gender-responsive budget policies in mind. Promoting gender equality through the arts and creative industries, a report commissioned by Victorian Health Promotion Foundation has found that the development of art and culture has long been a vehicle for social change. Yet, the arts are always the first to go. To add insult to injury, the government has provided no proof of ex-ante gender assessment or proposed any plans for ex-post assessment of this variation in the budget. No proposals for monitoring, no proposals for compliance. I question how feasible this motion is. The skills training program is proactive. It empowers the disenfranchised through education. The program allows participants to train, retrain, and retool themselves in skills for a sustainable self-development. Skills and competencies developed aids in the diversification of income streams and employment generation. Reducing the budget for this program by more than half in the name of gender responsiveness is taking one step forward just to take 5 back. I am confident that this entire cabinet...
Your time has expired.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of Planning and Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this bill. As the Minister of Planning and Development, the principal mandate is national development. It is to ensure that our country reaches its highest peak at all pillars. Madam Speaker, the initiatives proposed by the Minister of Finance, where gender equality can be achieved through education, the environment, and the safety of our women, coincides with all
the multifaceted vision that my ministry proposed. And for this, I endorse this bill. Under this ministry, we pay close attention to the Sustainable Development Goals as well as the Millennium Development Goals, which highlights the importance of gender equality. According to the United Nations Development Programme, fighting inequality is crucial for the acceleration of development of any nation. Madam Speaker, I would like to ask my friends on the other side, do they feel any sense of affinity with this word development? The change and growth that gender equality allows us to achieve should be desired by all parliamentarians. To strengthen these development goals, we have established Vision 2030, which I can assure you will achieve national prosperity at all pillars. Through collaboration with my fellow colleagues, we in fact intend to prioritize gender justice. Thematically, we will put our people first, ensuring equal opportunities for boys and girls at schools. We will deliver good governance and services, protecting our women through the TTPS. We will place environment at the center, initiating agricultural products like Climate Smart. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, you would notice that my colleagues who experience a reduction in funds reflect an attitude of understanding. This is because they comprehend that a decrease in funds does not indicate a decrease in the government's concern for their priorities. The government has established programs like the Population Unit Program as well as the Skills Training Program, which during the year of 1960. Madam Speaker, this reflects decades of care, decades of concern, decades of support. Madam Speaker, it is time that we give gender equality the same amount of attention. Furthermore, through the Public Sector Investment Program 2020, we ensure that these ministers are supported by constructing recreational facilities for the youth, by implementing a self-help program within communities, and constructing new hospitals in areas namely Point Fortin and Arima. As I close, let it be known that I am not here for the banter. I am here to fulfill my role as a parliamentarian, to ensure that every need and problem that our citizens face is tended to. So let us push for development. Let us push for change. Let us stand for equality. Let us stand for our country. Thank you.
Member for Caroni West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while I congratulate the government on their proposal of a gender-responsive budget, and I welcome the initiatives brought forward, I simply cannot support such a bill due to its contradictory nature. Gender-responsive budgeting should appeal to everyone, men, women, boy, and girl. So then I question, why are all the improvements stated for the benefit of women? How does this promote gender justice? Where is the intersectionality? I am aware that women are disadvantaged in our current patriarchal society, but the agricultural sector in Trinidad and Tobago is one that is primarily male-dominated. If food security is our main concern, would it not be more beneficial to us as a country to improve the conditions for all farmers and not just small-scale women farmers? A Guardian article entitled "Farmers on a Treadmill" sought to highlight the problems faced by some rice farmers in the Caroni West constituency, where they face problems of predial larceny, lack of water, global warming, and flooding, which results in major losses year after year. These traumatic experiences have led to farmers discouraging future generations, as one farmer even said, and I quote, "I told my children it doesn't make sense being a farmer. You stand to lose too much and there is no compensation."
This same article states that farmers are still struggling and the country is no closer to food security than it was several years ago. As member for Caroni West, my focus is merely to improve the conditions for female farmers, but to improve the conditions for farmers in general. And as agricultural economist Omadat Maharaj said, policy changes at a national level are necessary to save the agriculture industry, and this can only be done by examining the coping methods of our existing farmers. I am aware that the agriculture sector receives the smallest cut of the budget year after year, and it may increase and it may benefit from an increase. However, Madam Speaker, there is no evidence which proves that increasing the budgetary allocation will in turn increase productivity, and this is what we need to attain food security. Thank you.
Member for San Fernando South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First and foremost, let me just state that I am in agreement of this bill. Madam Speaker, a recent study through a green paper through the National Policy on Gender Development of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on February 2018 stated, and I quote, "Health, education, family, labor, economics, acts of violence, opportunities for educational training and fair recourse are justice and some of the key areas which impact differently upon men and women, and their roles often are divergent." According to the National Human Development Index by the Central Statistic Office in 2016, the city of San Fernando, my constituency, was ranked amongst the highest in regards to dimensions of health, education, and income. Madam Speaker, an article posted in the Newsday Guardian on July 4th, 2019, and I quote, "Students performing in the San Fernando West Secondary and the advisor of Educational Minister Anthony Garcia will be requesting that the school be transitioned into a 7-year institution." Their principal even quoted and said that the 2018 CSEC CVQ examination results were the second best in the school. He said 66% of students writing the CXC examinations in 2018 were successful in getting grades of 1 to 3, and fairly equal number were males. So you see, Madam Speaker, the government considers all genders educational improvement, whilst the opposition, on the other hand, is blindsided, or rather dumbfounded, to the importance of male development. Since the declaration of the policy of free universal secondary education as a preamble of the 15-year educational plan and the continued adherence to this policy by the government, it would require a government with great confidence in itself, very healthy relationships with the people to put forward this type of argument. Madam Speaker, I would like to invite my friends on the opposition to take into logical and realistic thinking about the integral importance of education and gender. I'm inviting you to ask yourself, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? Why deprive the next generation of youths the proper educational opportunity to succeed? The United Nations entity for gender equality and empowerment in the Caribbean stated that the government of Trinidad and Tobago had already outlined its development priorities and strategies to address the challenges in the vision of 2030 and beyond. I assure you, the opposition, that the government makes no kunamono decisions and knows exactly what it is doing and what needs to be done. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Pointe-a-Pierre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I must commend the government for putting forward a bill that finally recognizes that closing gender gaps in Trinidad and Tobago requires more than just non-discrimination policies, but is also highly dependent on careful gender budgeting. However, this bill is fundamentally flawed and can perpetuate distorted developments across Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the government has boasted that this bill promotes equality and insinuates that all women are high priority, but are the women and men who depend on the Elite Athlete Assistance Program not a high priority? Aren't the women and men from low-income households who participate in the skills training program a high priority? What about our citizens and their sexual and reproductive health? Is this not a high priority? I've analyzed the talks and deliberations held today, and the government has somehow convinced themselves that stifling funding from these programs to implement measures without proving the feasibility and duplicate programs that already exist is the best way of achieving gender equality. Moreover, Madam Speaker, the division mandated with the responsibility of gender has been neglected in this bill. Page 18 of the 2019-2020 Guide to Budget produced by the Financial Scrutiny Unit of the Office of the Parliament reveals that the Ministry of Education, the TTPS, and the Ministry of Agriculture already has allocated expenditures of $5.8 billion, $2.5 billion, and $750 million respectively, whereas only $277 million is to be stretched thinly amongst the Office of the Prime Minister, the Child Affairs Division, and the Gender Division. May I remind this House that the Gender Division is the primary body responsible for gender-related issues and also for formulating our national gender policy. But apparently the government forgot that their gender policy has been a green paper since February 2018, which means that the policy is yet to be finalized. Therefore, how can gender budgeting even be their priority when it is yet to be finalized and still awaiting consultation? I am in disbelief that this government is trying to convince this bench to support this fly-by-night bill, which obviously lacks proper consultation, and most importantly, it lacks a finalized guiding policy framework. I therefore challenge the government to stop putting the cart before the horse, but instead finalize our national gender policy, then lay it before this Parliament. Secondly, realize that if sufficient funding and focus was placed in the rightful hands of the Gender Division, we will not be sitting in this chamber debating this bill. And as I close, I want to assure the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we, the opposition, do hold the same passion towards gender-responsive budgeting. However, we cannot and we will not support a faulty bill. I therefore urge the government to take our recommendations, and I assure you that together we will aspire and together we will achieve on this walk towards gender equality. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
I now call upon the Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank my colleagues for their contributions. Madam Speaker, it is heartbreaking to sit and listen to the opposition rebut a bill that is not only going to benefit their constitutions, but also the constituents of our sitting government and every citizen of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, George Bernard Shaw said, "Progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything." This is perfectly why they are in opposition and not in government. As we move forward to transforming the landscape of one society, gender-responsive budgeting is a platform to ensure that the budget is constructed to facilitate the social, physical, and emotional needs of a person, not their needs holistically, but their needs emotionally. Madam Speaker, the opposition fails to understand that though they are not in government, they still hold the same responsibility for the advancement of this country. It is in that vein, Madam Speaker, I am pleased to be leading our government who not only understand what it means to govern, But we are forever cognizant that we are here to serve all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Our only agenda is to ensure that we continue building a society where your grandchildren and my grandchildren will be afforded the opportunity to benefit from sound, stable policies implemented by a government who cares for them. Madam Speaker, it baffles me that the opposition leader mentioned that the Minister of Finance was wrong to reallocate money from the Ministry of Health while teens are dropping out of school due to teenage pregnancy. But clearly, the opposition leader has indicated to this honorable House her inability to comprehend standard English as we sympathize with her. Madam Speaker, permit me to allay.
For it. Member, I do not agree. Member, you may continue.
Madam Speaker, permit me to allay the fears of my colleagues on the other side, as the Minister of Education had implemented strategic plans to deal with the impending reallocations. Rest assured, my dear friends, that the money will not be going into our pockets. However, it will be used to benefit the citizens of this country. Oh, and thanks for putting an ear out there and counting the hospitals and health centers for my government. We know the numbers, and it is by far absurd to place one in each community. The opposition by far needs to stop minding the business of the government and start minding the country's business. My government listens to our people and serves the interests of the citizens. May I remind this honorable House that this bill is not the promotion of segregation, but the implementation of policies geared towards the development of our country. Madam Speaker, as I close, permit me to echo the words of Albert Einstein, where he reminded us, great initiatives have encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. Who the cap fits, let them wear it. I thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A revolutionary Caribbean economist, Sir Arthur Lewis, once said, "Good economics comes from understanding the conditions under which people live in." Economics is the study of how scarce resources are allocated for production, distribution, and consumption in such a way that every citizen can enjoy a high standard of living and a high quality of life. And may I remind you that in Trinidad and Tobago, we suffer a great deal of gender inequality that continues to hamper this nation's economic, social, human, and sustainable development. However, I must commend the opposition for their concerns shared in today's sitting, with special mention to the member of Caroni Central and Faizabad for their suggestions, which I must commend them for. However, it appears to me that this opposition is taking this government for granted. It appears as if they have not even read this bill at all or even understand as to the legal structure of a bill. With special mention to the health sector, let me remind everyone of some major issues faced by the health sector: poor capacity management, poor human resource management, poor procurement methods, and may I remind you that money alone will not alleviate these problems, but rather a reallocation to focus on the causal factors of such large patient numbers in order to solve those problems and alleviate the burden on the public healthcare system. Subsequently, Madam Speaker, let me remind the opposition of some of the roles and responsibilities of the Ministry of Education to draw up strategies, policies, and plans for educational reform and development, to promote all-round development of education for pre-primary, secondary, and special needs education, which was a concern by the member for Oropouche East. Madam Speaker, it seems as though the opposition is contradicting themselves and not educating themselves on the roles and functions of the various ministries. How can I stand here and hear an allegation or a question about how is it that irrigation procedures are going to be put in place for the farmers? Isn't that already understood that the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries will be providing these services? Madam Speaker, when we speak about education, we refer to a multifaceted educational approach across academic, vocational, and technical training. So my question is, if we educate our youth on gender issues, won't they grow up into more responsible men and women? Men and women who will no longer engage in unhealthy interactions? Men and women who will no longer contribute to gender inequality? Furthermore, as echoed by our sister island Barbados, Prime Minister Mia Mottley declared that global temperature rise, many Caribbean islands will not survive. And Madam Speaker, our male and female farmers in Trinidad and Tobago will not survive the disasters of climate change, which is why this government is putting measures in place in order to protect them. Every day in the news, we see our women being murdered, tortured at the hands of their partners. And we believe that retraining our police staff and implementing these programs will severely aid in the protection of these women. Madam Speaker, I sat in this chamber today and I have heard countless allegations and pointless cartoon questions being posed towards this government. And whilst I understand the concerns of the opposition, we are well aware of the society in which we live in. Our males are at a disadvantage, and so are our females. Madam Speaker, this government of this nation strives to ensure that we conduct all activities based on economic efficiency and the elimination of wastage. And we see no need to have multiple educational programs trying to achieve the same goal from ministry to ministry with an exaggeration of public funds to be disbursed. And Madam Speaker, in ending, as a concern raised by members of the opposition as to why it is the Minister of Finance does not disperse funds from her ministry, I would just like to stand here and remind everyone, as the Minister of Finance of the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, equipped with the economic, developmental, and financial expertise to lead this country's public finances in such a way that we achieve not only economic growth, but economic, human, social, and sustainable development. I would like to reassure the opposition that I am well competent in the reallocation of this country's public finances. And also to request the opposition that this is the first attempt by this government to ensure that such a bill amendment is made. And in order to see it play out, you must give it time. And we assure you that if this proves to be unsuccessful, we will take the necessary measures. In closing, we are all women in this chamber, 60 to be exact. Unfortunately, the remaining 717,194 females in Trinidad and Tobago may not be able to occupy the seats we are sitting in today. Let us be on the right side of history. Don't oppose for opposing's sake. On behalf of those women, let us be responsible by implementing the measures needed to see that more women are included, more women are protected, and more women are striving. I would like to take this opportunity to wish us all in here a happy International Women's Day. I thank you, Madam Speaker, and I beg to move.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Vary the Appropriation of the Sum, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2020 Act 2019, be now read a second time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? Yes. The ayes have it. The ayes have it, the bill has been passed.
A bill entitled, An Act to Vary the Appropriation of the Sum of the Issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2020, Act 2019.
Leader of the House. Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 87-2, I now beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Vary the Appropriation of the Sum of the Issue, which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2020 Act 2019 be forthwith read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Vary the Appropriation of the Sum, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2020 Act 2019 be forthwith read a third time and passed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? Yes. I think the ayes have it. The bill was passed.
A bill entitled An Act to Vary the Appropriation of the Sum, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2020 Act 2019.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Krista Daniel, the Gender and Communications Officer at YWiL. President of the Senate, Senator the Honorable Christine Kangaloo, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Bridget Anisette George, Vice President of the Senate, Senator Nigel de Freitas, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, with responsibility for Gender and Child Affairs, the Honorable Ayanna Webster Roy, Members of Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, family and friends of our YWiL participants, the Canadian High Commissioner and representatives from the Canadian High Commission, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of developmental bodies and civil society, staff at the Office of the Parliament, Parliamericas and YWiL, members of the media, specially invited guests, members of the public, welcome, and to the members of our first ever all-female sitting of Parliament. Give yourselves a round of applause, please. Good afternoon, everyone. I am honored to be here with you to celebrate this very historic occasion in commemoration of International Women's Day. I am the Master of Ceremonies for this afternoon's proceedings. 2020. It is an important year for us as we commemorate 25 years of Beijing and other international agreements that have advanced the rights and agenda of women. 2020 is also the first year YWiL is being held in the Caribbean. And this is the first YWiL, and it's happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think we should give ourselves a round of applause for that. Creating a space for sharing, nurturing, facilitating solidarity amongst women and bridging gaps is what YWiL is about. Today's all women sitting of YWiL in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago is historic, and it's the culmination of a 2-day leadership workshop. Yes, we didn't have weeks, we only had 2 days to put all of this together. And I think what we saw here today is magnificent. And I think, again, you all should give yourselves a round of applause. This leadership program has brought together 58 young women from diverse backgrounds interested in politics and community leadership between the ages of 18 and 25 from across Trinidad and Tobago. They all took part in a series of skill-building workshops and dialogue on themes of importance. YWiL is aimed at encouraging young women to consider leadership as a future career path and provide an opportunity for them to build skills, knowledge, and networks to support their journey as future leaders in the Caribbean. The debate today was phenomenal, and from what was presented, I trust that the future is in great hands. Congratulations to each and every one of you. It has been a very intense few days. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies, sorry. See, I am accustomed to saying ladies and gentlemen. Ladies, again, give yourselves a round of applause. Let me now welcome Speaker of the House, the Honorable Bridget Anisette George, to offer congratulatory remarks.
Thank you very much to the Communication Officer of YWiL. And pleasant good afternoon to the 58 young women who've taken part in today's Model Parliament. Good afternoon to the members of the audience, and good afternoon to the Director General of Parliamericas and also to the representatives of YWiL. I am sure when I say this, I speak on behalf of the President of the Senate, Honorable Christine Kangaloo, the Vice President of the Senate, the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Mrs. Ayanna Webster Roy, MP, and the wider parliamentary community. While we may seem small in representation at this time, during the course of the debate, other members of Parliament sat in and observed. As you know, parliamentarians are busy, and sometimes it's quite difficult for them to spare a number of hours. The ministers have their portfolios, and the members of the opposition also have their other commitments. But other members were here. I caught sight of Senator Thompson Ahi. I caught sight of Senator Weed Mark. I caught sight of the member for La Hoketa Talparu, member Coffee, during the course of this morning. So rest assured that your contributions were not ignored at all by the members of Parliament. I want to congratulate you. I think you all did extremely well. And I think the debate at this time, and it's the first all-women's Parliament. And while some of us may marvel at how well it went, I think it speaks to the power of women. We support the team. What you all have done here certainly supports the theme for International Women's Day 2020, equal for equal. You've shown that you are lesser than none. You know, in terms of gender-responsive budgeting, and I think what you all showed here today supports that. When people hear the term gender-responsive budgeting, and when people hear the term gender at all, they think only about women. And what you've done here sorts of debunks that and shows that gender-responsive budgeting, while it provides for funding for the male and female boys and girls, is not just only about showing that you provide funding through the national budget in accordance with the needs of the gender. But in your contributions, you show that, look, it is a form of transparency, it's a form of accountability, it's a form of social justice. It promotes human rights. And in your contributions, you also showed some of the tools. So I think, if I recall, it was the member, I think of, it's either Miaro or Faisabad, talking about, the statistics. How do you know that this is going to achieve a result? I think your contribution showed that generally that there's consensus that gender-responsive budgeting is a very proper tool for using the limited resources. There are never going to be enough resources. There's never going to be enough money or enough anything. But how do you eliminate waste? How do you promote efficiency? How do you promote effectiveness? And I think you all brought it out there. It's a question of not whether or not there should be gender-responsive budgeting, but how do you do it? Your contributions also showed a great knowledge of parliamentary procedure, parliamentary practice, the use of the standing orders. In terms of, I saw people invoking Standing Order 4410 about the reading, and I must say, Madam Speaker, you did that very effectively when you stood up and you made the comment after with respect to members sticking too much to their notes reading. I saw members invoke Standing Order 48.4. I saw members use the standing order that deals with interruption. I think member for Naparima did that against one of the other members who was on her legs, and she very graciously gave way. In all your contributions, I must say, too, your language was quite parliamentary. And you also, used the fundamentals of a debate, in that most members, when they got up to speak, rebutted what the former speaker said, or some other former speaker, before going into their own presentation. You were well researched. you were well researched just not on gender responsive budgeting, you were well researched on current affairs locally and internationally. You know, how you all wove in the COVID-19 into your contributions, how you all worked in the national gender policy or the absence of it in your contributions. The police stations not being receptive to women coming in. You know, all of these are really very current issues. I also heard in your contributions reference to parliamentary reports, committee reports. So I think it was really very inspiring to see the breadth of knowledge, the breadth of your research, which you brought to bear here. And I think your total contribution can be used as a learning tool for young people in other aspects of debates. So I really want to commend you all on this exercise. I want to also say and end in picking up something that your Minister of Finance said in winding up, and in terms of not opposing for opposing's sake, but for us joining together towards bringing a betterment. And I want to say that each of you taking part, even your clerks who don't get to speak, but who provide a very important function for the Parliament, you were the first. And there's something about being first, okay? In terms of you all came, you broke down a barrier, you opened new boundaries for all women's Parliament. And I think you successfully did that. I want to thank our partners, Parliamericas, and Civil, in coming and approaching us, in joining with them in this exercise. Part of our strategic objectives, and I think as the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, who spoke about the strategic objective in her contribution. Part of our strategic objectives of the Parliament is outreach. And in terms of one of the foundations of democracy is participation. And therefore we try to reach out so that people can understand the value of democratic values and also understand what parliaments do and the importance of parliamentary democracy. So that asking us to join with Civil and Parliamericas in doing an all-female parliament is also part of our outreach. And I'm certain what you all did here will encourage other young women to speak out, to express. It might be a first for you, but it shows courage. And I think that you must really stand out as a source of courage for your peers and other young women. I think you all cover the age group 18 to 25. So I think you all qualify to run for office. Okay, and you know, we tend to think that youth is our tomorrow. Youth is really our today. And today, you made our today look great. You made our today look secure. And I want to thank you all for coming here, sharing with us, preparing so well, embracing the parliamentary experience. And let's hope that being the first in this exercise, you won't be the last. I thank you all.
you, Madam Speaker. We will now be distributing certificates to all our debaters. To present will be the President of the Senate,